Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my channel's monthly compendium for the month of July 2022. Case file number 679, written by Skydeer Chan, The Future Purple Jacket. Back in 2018, I was 17 years old and had come back from abroad to visit my friends in my home city for the winter. I remember it was the cold month of December and I was walking back to my apartment after a medical appointment with my mother when I happened to pass by this very old abandoned drama theater that was built in the 1800s where my grandfather had temporarily worked in his youth, which had been closed ever since the 90s. I recall I hadn't been on that street for a long time since my childhood, because I would always avoid the old drama theater building as it gave me very strange vibes, so I would always take the other way back home to the city center. However, that particular day, I happened to take that route for some unknown reason, and I took that road with my mother while we discussed my upcoming exams, until she stopped me at the intersection for some odd reason and told me I was going the wrong way. At that moment, I saw a young blonde girl sitting in a very familiar blue Opel car playing on her PSP 3000 in the car, and she glanced up to look at me all of a sudden. Our eyes met and I felt an odd sense of familiarity and recollection. I froze for a bit in shock until I heard my mother's voice and decided to quickly turn back, went home as if nothing happened, and then realized that when I was a kid back in 2009, it was snowing and I had seen an older teenager with highlights, makeup, and a purple winter jacket looking at me strangely when I was in the car with my dad in the back seat, waiting for my mother to get back from the local store a few blocks away. And that's when it hit me that this person was actually me in the past. She too had moved away quickly after locking eyes with me when I was a kid, and she was dressed in the same attire I was wearing in 2018. It was almost as if what happened wasn't supposed to happen. I wasn't supposed to be there on that day. Even up to this day, I'm still confused. How could I possibly have seen myself from the future? And for me to remember it, I've never told anyone about it because they would assume I'm a delusional idiot or something. This has been something I haven't been able to explain to anyone. I still sometimes think about it and wonder whether I just fell asleep with my eyes open and had hallucinated the entire event, but I recall it as blue as daylight. I've even asked my mother about the event and she blankly stared at me saying I acted odd that day, wanting to go back to that place for some unknown reason. I don't believe in the supernatural, but after having experienced this event, I think there is definitely something there, which we aren't aware of. Case notes, file number 679. The Future Purple Jacket. A few quick points here to make. The first is that I don't think you hallucinated. That would have required you to hallucinate in the same way as a child and as an almost adult. I don't think that's very likely. As far as time travel itself goes, I don't think you time traveled exactly. I think you have an ability, an inner temporal ability to perceive a possible future. Now, there's some minor spoilers for Supernatural if you haven't seen it yet. Go watch it. Later on in the show, Death shows Dean every possible version of his death, all written down in books in a giant death library that stretches for nearly infinity, just for his versions of deaths. And I like that portrayal, that even death doesn't know exactly how someone is going to die in any given universe. It depends on their choices and free will. So we have an instance here where your choices will lead to so many different branching paths. And this ties back to multiverse theory and quantum immortality. There's so many avenues and choices we can make and so much general chaos through physics in the universe that no one, even God or even server developers or even death, can predict exactly what someone is going to do. And I mean, this is important if we do have free will, which I do believe, and I think I have to believe it. If not, what's the point of anything? Or being driven along in some grand fantasy, but it's not really us. But I digress. Getting back to the main point I want to make here is that we have choices, and our choices matter, and they matter more than you might think. And in your case, you were able to see a version of your future, but it's not predetermined. You just saw a version of many incalculable numbers. One thing that's very interesting to ask yourself though, and this is something the Oracle asked Neo when he first sees her. He knocks over the plate of cookies, but before he does, she says, don't worry about it. He asks what, and then knocks them over. And then she asks him, after he apologizes, here's what's really gonna scratch your head. Would you have knocked over those cookies if she hadn't said anything? Well, in this case, would you have still gone to the same spot if you hadn't seen yourself as a child in that spot? I think in this case, probably, because it didn't change too much. You didn't even remember it, and you didn't notice it was yourself then, because you were a child. You didn't know what you were gonna look like when you were 10 years older. Just the idea that even seeing the future can change it, because you'll change your behaviors that led to that possible future that you saw. Creepy file number 30, written by Obvious Wear, 8848, a life-saving motorcycle. Back when I was still working at a rehab facility as a social worker for girls who were victims of trauma, it was out of town. I would take a jeepney and a bus as well to get to my workplace. I was an in-house social worker, meaning that I will stay at the facility for 5 days and I can get 2 days off. My shift is Saturday to Wednesday, meaning that I can go back home Wednesday evening and return to the rehab facility Friday evening. I like to travel during evenings, since there are not a lot of passengers and I can enjoy my window seat alone. The facility is located in a rural area. I can take a tricycle going there from the bus stop, but it's too expensive for me. I would always walk alone, and mind you, I have to pass through a wide sugarcane field before going there. There's no usual streetlights there, but I didn't mind it, except for that one night. Just near the road was a small mom-and-pop store where I would usually buy my snacks. It's a kilometer away from my workplace. I got close with the owner, and she would often offer that she would ask her son-in-law to drive me to my workplace. I always politely decline her offer because I don't want to be a burden. That time, she offered again and I took it because when I looked down the road going to my workplace, it was dark. The air felt heavy and weird. I finished my Pepsi and cigarette and hopped on the back of the motorcycle. When we reached the middle part, there were 5 to 7 drunk men talking in the middle of the road and saw us coming. One guy said, "Miss, come down and talk to us." I got scared and he came closer. The son-in-law instantly drove his motorcycle fast and some of the men chased us while calling after me. Thank goodness they were not able to keep up. If I didn't trust my instincts that night, I don't know what would have happened to me. Bonus file, written by Legendary Shampoo, The Spinning Coins. My mother passed away very recently from liver and kidney failure at the same time. Her death was a result of drinking too much and too often, and it caught up with her fast. After she had passed, something was doing stuff inside of my house, throwing coins and making noises. Things started happening about 1.5 years ago. It started with me and my brother feeling like something was around. I felt like eyes were on my back all the time. When I met my girlfriend, she noticed a smell she described as a smell of death at the entrance of the house when she started coming over as well. It went away after the first 2 months of her coming over, but it returned after my mother had passed away. About 6 months later, my brother was given a book. I'm not sure what it was exactly, but it looked like some sort of religious or ritualistic text. After he got the book, he said he felt like he started having a horrible bad luck streak. Things just kept going wrong for him, and this culminated in him being thrown at a wall. He described it as being pushed and attacked, like something was trying to hurt him, and had a deep cut above his eye and a black eye after. We burned the book the next day. A few months later, about 2 months before my mom passed away, me and my girlfriend were sitting in the living room talking. There is a big mirror on the wall, kind of over my girlfriend's right shoulder, just outside of what she'd be able to see peripherally. In the middle of the conversation, she froze and whipped around to look behind her and jumped up saying she had seen something walk by just for a moment in the reflection of the mirror. I felt weird energy that night as well, and my brother had said later he and my mom had felt it too. Since then, we had weird noises on and off, and a few nights where everyone agreed something was off and felt something was around. My mom passed away about 2, maybe 3 weeks ago. Now, at the time, my brother told her while she was still alive to mess with him all the time and let him know she was there. After she passed, me and my brother and girlfriend were watching a movie when they both began saying something was wrong. I felt off as well, but they are more often able to notice things like that. That night, my brother and my girlfriend both felt off the rest of the night, and my girlfriend had a panic attack. 3 days ago, roughly, my girlfriend and I were hanging out in the living room, and she had been having a really hard time with some bad thoughts, panic attacks, anxiety, etc. Suddenly, we both heard a noise right next to us. Quiet but distinct, like something had shifted. I got up to start looking around, and my girlfriend just froze, staring into the kitchen. She said she had seen a figure staring at us and just held eye contact with it. She described it as being evil but not angry, tall and slim with pale eyes. I walked around the house and stood right where she had seen it, staring at us, and I felt something that I can best describe as a wave of electrical energy sitting on my head, making my hairs rise, and my head felt high and lightheaded. When I walked out of where I was told it was standing, I felt nothing, but when I walked back, I felt the same thing instantly. As I walked around the house, she said she would notice it go away and then get glimpses again of it. We felt something from my mom's room, and I went to go look, and we heard a loud crack like something hit a wall and a coin spinning and bouncing on the floor. I came back into the kitchen, and there were 3 pennies laying on the floor where we heard it, but we had only heard 1. I moved out the next day. My brother and I are no longer speaking, but he still lives in the house by himself now. Do you think there is significance to any of this? Does this have to do with my brother asking my mom to make her presence known? What should I do about it, if anything? Case file number 680, written by Horse Lover 2529. A new kind of White House. Excuse my French, but I'm so freaking confused. I was home every day. I noticed things very well because I like to look around and observe nature, etc. Every single day I walk home. Been living on the same street for 10 years. Today I was walking and noticed a white house between 2 houses. One was brown on the right side of this new house, and one was yellow on the left. I honestly stared at the house for a few seconds, trying to remember if I had seen it before. There's a run-down house on our street, so I thought maybe they fixed it up. Nope. That house is like 5 to 6 houses down from this one. I noticed they were painting it, so I tried to remember if there was a house there at all. Nope. I was really freaked out. I've never seen the driveway, the cars, the people, any of it. Never seen this house. I could have sworn that this house wasn't here before. It's so unlikely that I didn't notice this before because I walk home every day. I'm so confused. Nothing else is off on my street, but from the 4 hours I was gone, I highly doubt someone built a whole house in that time and had time to paint it too. It's just impossible. I swear the yellow and brown houses were right next to each other. I think I'm losing my mind. I'm not on any drugs or intoxicated. I've never done drugs or alcohol in my entire life. Anyone had anything similar to this happen? It's on Google Maps. The more I look at it, the more I'm confused and realize I've never seen it. So I decided to ask my mother. She said it's been there all along, and I'm so confused. I swear it hasn't. I highly doubt I missed it since I walk home all the time from the same way. We're talking hundreds of times passing by. Case file number 681, written by Morticia Dumbledore. The newspaper Anomaly. Like everywhere else in the world, we receive the daily newspaper. Well, daily. So I usually discard certain items in my kitchen after wrapping them up in old newspapers. Of course, I casually, by default, glance around at the articles printed on it before wrapping and throwing it away. These past few days, something weird happened. First day, I picked up an old newspaper, tore a random sheet, saw the page, and it had the recent Met Gala images on it. Very eye-catching. Blake Lively in a golden dress, Cara Delevingne covered in gold paint, Sarah Jessica Parker in the big, glamorous headgear. Not sure what those are called. Anyway, I crumpled it up around the trash and binned it. A couple of days later, I pulled out an old newspaper again, tear a random sheet out, and again, without doubt, it's the same sheet. Same pictures, same articles. I think to myself, maybe I'm mistaken, or maybe perhaps we got 2 sets of identical papers delivered by error. We order only one set of papers for the house. No one else orders an extra set. Well, with Google and all. I still glance at the date, just to be sure. It really is a date I saw from 2 days ago. I wrote it off as déjà vu. Now, almost a week to 10 days after this incident, which I'd completely forgotten about because of how trivial a coincidence it seemed, I pick up a random paper from the old pile of papers that I have collected over the past few days. I tear a random sheet again, and it's the same bloody sheet again. Same pictures, same article, same bloody date. Even if somehow an identical copy of the newspaper found its way into my house, how is the same sheet appearing thrice in a row? After me crumpling it up and discarding it multiple times. No one's messing with me for sure, because firstly, no one in my house has that kind of time or sense of humor. Secondly, there's no way to ensure what page from the stack I'd choose to tear off. Bonus file, written by Sock Tacos. Talk about cruel and unusual punishment. I was in juvie as a kid pretty often. I ended up doing 4 months out of a 6-month sentence for possession with intent to distribute and probation violation, which was the longest I had gone to juvie. Ghost stories have been shared amongst the kids in there fairly often. The DOs, detention officers, would chime in time to time to tell theirs as well. Some were pretty hard to buy because it's juvenile and there isn't much to do besides tell stories, especially when talking through vents and toilets. One night it was time for lockdown, bedtime. So we all turned in our stuff and headed in our cells. This time of night, someone is usually talking to you through a vent, so we'd stay up a little bit after lockdown unless you were tired. Sometimes we'd mess around and even holler out the cell door saying insults to one another or egging on the DOs to come into the pod just to annoy them. This night we thought someone was messing around. We hear what sounds like wailing, like someone pretending to be in pain, echoing through a cell door. And so a lot of the kids were yelling for them to shut the hell up and banging on the cell doors to get them to stop. A lot of threats were thrown out towards whoever was making the noise. Then the wailing sounded like someone was actually in pain. Guttural moaning and groaning, sounds you would hear from someone dying. Absolutely terrifying to hear. I started to get chills down my back because it sounded unreal. Finally, the DO came in and turned on all the lights and started calling out for whoever it was, seeing as someone sounded like they needed medical assistance. Then opened all of our doors and told us to step out so they could figure out who needs help. The sound kept going even after we all stepped out and lined up downstairs. The sound was coming from the second level, from a cell that no one was inside of. 2 DOs went up and opened the door, and the wailing kept going. The DOs radioed it in, saying there's nobody in the cell, and they were openly talking about how creeped out they were. And then a DO rushed down the stairs and told another DO that we all needed to leave the pod. We grabbed our blankets and moved to the pod across, all while this wailing was continuing. It was like something out of a horror movie. While we were waiting in the other pod for new cells to be assigned, the lights in the pod we were in had started to flicker. The look of horror on the kids' faces and the faces of the DOs sent goosebumps over my entire body as we were all witnessing this. One DO even told us we needed to pray, so we all grabbed hands and began praying. Even kids that hated each other were grabbing hands and praying. That's how wild this was. Eventually, we were all sent into our new cells and down for the night. The next morning, we were telling all the kids in the new pod about what happened, and they were shook. One DO had told us about him and the other DO with him that they had seen a black cloaked figure floating around in the pod around midnight, stopping at different cells. We never got moved back into that pod for the rest of my time there. I saw they ended up making it a rec room for the blue shirts, kids with more privileges because of good behavior. Case notes bonus file. Talk about cruel and unusual punishment. So this is making me think a lot about manifestations and stories I've narrated about that. One of them was someone manifesting just in their thoughts about a river increasing its flow, manifesting water. Another one about manifesting money. There's a lot of concept about that where our own thoughts can play into the reality of the world. Personally, I don't think anyone is actually creating physical matter from just their thoughts. That requires too much energy. However, I do think the collective pull, the weight from all the minds in the juvie pod could result in perhaps some kind of tether on a spirit that was in agony. So maybe they died in that cell, but they were out of phase and not really interacting with the real world. But then just everyone's presence and collective thoughts thinking about horror ghost stories and the like drew it in. It was in this reality and we heard its wailing, as you describe it, chilling and unreal. I can only imagine what that would be like, the horror. So that's what I would describe it as. I don't think this was a random haunting. I think it was everyone's thoughts focused on one topic that pulled it in. It's almost like a Ouija board, where everyone in the room is concentrated on this object, and through it, the active will of the desire for something to happen does happen. It's almost like people who are compulsively happy. They tend to draw other people that are happy in, and even make others happy themselves. It's sort of an indirect manifestation effect. And in a way, I think it's inspiring and motivating, don't you? Case file number 682, written by user 01980. My mom hacked the simulation. This might sound like it's not a first-hand encounter, but it is. Just bear with me for a bit. Backstory about my mom. My mom had always been spiritual and religious. She says she has a part of God's light, but I don't believe any of that. I'm a hardcore atheist. I just think that she found a way to hack the simulation without even realizing it. So my mom always says a prayer when she loses something, and she would miraculously find the thing she lost in the most unexpected of places. She even says the prayer for other people when they lose something. Literally one time, she said the prayer to one of her friends who lost their earrings in the sink. She watched the earrings fall into the sink, and after asking my mom to say the prayer, she found them on the floor of her living room. But that's only one thing that my mom does. I don't even know anymore. So one day, I was sarcastically telling my mom to say a prayer to find my old precious puppy doll, which I had lost a long time ago. She literally said, "I'm afraid that you'll go insane after finding it there, in a completely different country, and you won't be able to handle it." I was moving to another country, so I was like, yeah, right. So I moved to another country, and guess what I found? Not the puppy doll, unfortunately, but I found a hair clipper that I lost almost 2 years ago. It suddenly appeared in one of my bags in the country. I was shocked because I literally had searched for it everywhere. Plus, I literally selectively choose each and every item and put them in the bag myself and then sealed it shut. I tried to rationalize that I must have missed it, but there's just no way, because I made sure to take only what I needed and the hair clipper just wasn't there. I didn't ask my mom about anything, because she would try to tease me because I don't believe in a god, but now this happened, and I don't know what to think. Bonus file written by Horror Appeal of Death and Gollums. I grew up with my grandma and lived with her most of my life, and her house always freaked me out because weird things happened. It's not like the house was old. No one had ever lived there previously, and it wasn't the typical scary house you think of when you think of a haunted house. I have my theories, but that's for another time, I suppose. Anyways, everyone in my family who stayed there has their own stories of things they've seen or heard, including myself. Some examples of what I experienced were hearing footsteps outside my door in the middle of the night, hearing someone in the master bathroom walking around and turning the sink on when I was the only one home. When I was young, I was sneaking downstairs to grab a snack and turned the corner to go downstairs and saw a little girl sitting on a big box we had at the bottom of the stairs. Seeing figures of people on the walls moving around, and the list goes on and on. These things happened throughout my life and were spaced out occurrences, so I tried to just ignore it all the best I could. But what I experienced when my grandma was dying were some of the most intense things I've ever witnessed. My grandma had breast cancer. Eventually, it spread through her body and she lost the battle. They put her in hospice and we set up her living room for her to stay in so we could take care of her. The last week of her life is when things started getting really weird. I would be sitting on the couch next to her bed and see people in the corner of my eye walking past the doorway in the hallway when even it was just me and her in the house. And when other people were there, they saw it too. There were times she would be looking up to the ceiling or at the walls and smile like she would be looking at someone she knew. Another time, my whole family was on the couch just being with her, and the light in the room went out, and my grandma smiled and said, "It'll come back on," and right when she said that, it did. While these occurrences were starting to happen frequently, it was just little things like that. But then the last few days of her life, she started declining more, so we bought a baby monitor with a camera to watch her when we weren't in the room to make sure she didn't try to leave the bed. She kept trying to do things on her own and would fall. Well, one night, my sister and I were upstairs in her bedroom talking, and we looked at the monitor screen, and I instantly started crying from what I saw. It's hard to describe what we saw. The only thing that comes close to what it looked like was a mix of a gremlin and a golem. It felt so off. We watched it almost like crawling and jumping on her bed, but she was asleep. It seemed like she knew it was there because she made a movement with her hand like she was hitting it away, and once she did that, it left. My sister went downstairs to check on her. She was still sleeping and nothing was there. It was one of the scariest things I've ever seen in my life, and even after 6 years, just the thought of it makes the hair on my arms stand up and my eyes begin to tear up. It's not just because of how scary it looked, but because of the way it made me feel. Even through the monitor, you could feel its presence and you could feel it was not good, whatever it was. The next night, my sister and I were back up in her bedroom watching a movie, and my sister looked at the monitor and studied it for a second, and told me to look at it too, which after what I had already witnessed, I was terrified to even look at it. But I did, and clear as day you could see a head behind my grandma, which looked like how she looked at the time, bald, sick, etc. So we took a picture of the monitor screen this time, and we zoomed in to see what it was, and we noticed that above that head was my uncle's face. You could see his features and could easily recognize it was him if you knew him. He was my grandma's son, who died a few years back from cancer. Well, I don't really believe in God, and I'm not sure where I stand on the afterlife, even after all my experiences. It was a feeling of relief seeing this after the horror I saw the night before. Almost like him saying, "It's okay, I got her." I have no idea what the head was behind her. My sister thinks it could be her starting to leave her body. It did look like it was her just watching her body laying there. A couple days later, she passed away. For the next month, we stayed there to pack up her house and sell it, and while there were some weird occurrences from time to time, that was pretty normal for the house, and it seemed like all the insane activity that occurred while she was dying had left with her. But I will never forget the things I saw in that house during the time, and even as I'm writing all this out, I have goosebumps. I do have the picture we took of the monitor. It's a pretty unsettling photo and shows my grandma too, so I'm not sure if I should post it. I think I won't to respect her, and for the sake of my own family. She was my best friend in the entire world. Case notes, bonus file of Death and Gollums. I'm so sorry for your loss, Horror Appeal. Last year, my mom lost her dad, my grandpa, and I was stuck in Canada. I couldn't even go to the funeral. It's hard to cope with that. Reach some sort of conclusion, or I think it's very true that time does mend all wounds, or at least patches over them. It's like a scar on your soul. It never quite goes away, but the pain certainly does. Regarding the presence that's in this house, it kind of strikes me as a poltergeist, which, by the way, if you didn't know, the root of poltergeist is poltern, which in German means to rumble or create sound, and Geist, which is just spirit or ghost. I think that's fascinating. Love the root of words. I think that fits well enough. Now that Gollum on camera, there are cases of manifestations of spirits taking form, especially tricksters or poltergeists that want to scare others, and that seems to be the intent. There was no harm directly done to your grandma or to you, besides a sort of trauma. And even in her weakened state, your grandma just tried to brush it away, like she's gonna have none of that. And your uncle was there too, trying to safeguard her. Maybe it was just your grandma's spirit, as it was sort of detaching, an astral projection. That is also possible. I like the idea that it was your uncle, that it was there to safeguard and just say, yeah, I got her. That's a very beautiful thought. That our loved ones are still around and keeping a watchful eye. If there's quantum immortality and it's just echoes or imprints of who we loved, well, they're still powerful. They can still affect the world. Ghosts and spirits are affecting the world all the time in the EM spectrum, flickering lights, turning off electronics, and even moving objects sometimes. If the world is simply a manifestation of wave properties, then it's not altogether that surprising that spirits or echoes are able to manipulate the world. They're just manipulating waves in certain Regards. It's all energy, in the end. And I want to leave you with a beautiful quote from a show I just finished watching, The Good Place, where, no spoilers, but one of the main characters, Chidi, says to someone else, I won't say who, that to look at death not as a finality, but as a wave in the ocean, returning to the ocean. It's beautiful in its simplicity, and it's almost the perfect analogy. We're all waves in the universe, and eventually we fade back in, but we'll re-emerge, if in another universe or in reincarnation, in some form or another. Your sentience does persist. I do believe that. Case file number 683, written by Gabriel Gary Lutz, a linguistic glitch. Okay, so for about a month, I've been playing this Wordle-inspired game called Lingual, where you're given a non-English word and you have to guess what language it is. A few days ago, I showed this game to a friend of mine, and after like 3 days of us both getting it right in one try, he texted me saying, "Bro, this game is so easy." I laughed and started to type, "Just wait until they give you a word in like Quechua or something," but stopped mid-message for some reason and ended up not sending it. I freaking wish I hadn't deleted it, because guess what the following day's language was? Yep, Quechua. I was so shocked when this happened, but haven't even told him because probably he wouldn't believe me. And why would I delete this message I was typing? And also, what are the odds? There's like 7,000 languages in the world, plus the game also has some of them divided into varieties. For example, European vs Brazilian Portuguese. Anyways, this is definitely nothing too bizarre like the other posts in the sub, but it's just a casual little glitch I thought I'd mention. Case file number 684, written by Lucid Roland, When Love is All Kinds of Magical. So, I'm on a weekend in a forest cabin. This happened just a few hours ago. My boyfriend has a watch that I bought him and he loves it. Later this day we were having fun, and he has his watch on. He's always wearing it except for shower and sleep. And it's silly, but he remembers seeing his watch next to my skin while we were having fun, and he thought that was classy and sexy. So we are finished. I keep looking at him. My eyes are always on him. And he gets up. I see his wrist and the watch is not there. It was on a chair next to the couch, a chair he could not have access during our fun time because I was sitting on him. And I never saw him taking it off. My eyes were always on him. I would have seen it. And he has absolutely no memories of taking it off. He's absolutely sure he had the watch on. The watch is laying on the side, and it is weird because he really cares for this watch and never puts it down on the side. Always flat. Right after he realized that the watch teleported, he got his right ear clogged and started feeling dizzy. He had to lay down. We really don't know what happened. We are going to ask the landlord of the cabin later if anything ever happened here like this. Okay, so the landlord took us hiking through the forest this afternoon. He told us that this cabin is often used by people with depression, PTSD, loss of memories. It's like a retreat, and he gives animal mediation sessions and everything. This is the only out of the ordinary thing with this cabin. The watch wasn't on time anymore either. When we watched the time on the watch, it was 4 p.m., but in reality, it was 4:47 p.m. But my boyfriend did tell me that there is a possibility that he changed the time by mistake because he likes to play with the buttons. He doesn't really use it to keep track of time, more for the aesthetic. Creepy file number 31, written by Cats Against Humanity, an amusement park of horror. I was reminded of this story yesterday. A friend and I were 15 years old, female, and we were let loose at a top-rated theme park where you would never think something scary would happen. Her mother and stepdad took us on a designated holiday, and rain was expected. I thought fewer people would be there. In the early 90s, not many people went on an actual holiday. My friend and I had been up almost 24 hours on a sugar high. Leaving two 15-year-olds at home alone for weeks is not a fabulous idea, go figure. We were all over the place, loud, manic, laughing at stupid crap. Her mom made one thing clear. If employees thought we were drunk and kicked us out, we could just freeze our butts off in the car way out in the parking lot while they had fun for hours on end. This was long before cell phones, the internet, and we had no books. It would have been hell. As the park cleared out, We got real food at a park restaurant and settled down, enjoying our time there. At one point, we kept riding this one ride. Usually, operators after midnight would allow us to sit in the ride and go through multiple times before closing because nobody was there. We were back to being sleep deprived and probably looked very intoxicated for all intents and purposes. These two guys running this particular ride kept making us go through the maze of a line to get back on this ride. It took minutes of rushing just to get back in the front. Each time we were more and more tired and laughing more. I didn't realize there was a method to the madness. The fourth time we went through, the guys running it asked us to come over to their side of the ride, but we pointed out that we couldn't and wouldn't jump the track. They had us ride, again, a huge car with only us in it, and when we got off, they were there, each taking one of our arms and forcing us into a part of the ride where workers are only allowed. It took me a minute to realize what was happening. These guys were on the tall side and built at least college-aged. I thought they were twins, but realized my mistake. They looked similar because they had the same theme uniform and haircuts. We were still giggling, and when I saw the looks on their faces, I realized that we were in serious trouble with a shot of adrenaline. They looked determined, and their heads were on a swivel. We hadn't seen anyone walking around in hours. Everything had lights on, and music was playing. Still, we hadn't seen the usual workers perpetually cleaning the park. Nobody was operating food stands. It was a ghost town. The next thing I knew, the guy was walking off with my friend, and the guy on me pushed me back against a door. This is not good. I had a flash of insight. This is a brand name family amusement park they took us to because they think we are easy prey. They are taking a huge chance messing with us because we could identify them, and there are cameras everywhere. I knew I had to act dumb, like I had no idea what was going on. And then I heard the other guy saying, "Hey, she won't cooperate. You said she'd cooperate." Cooperate? Oh, hell no. I gave a fake giggle and pretended to stumble into the guy who backed up. I pretended I was going to puke, and he pointed to a trash can. I went the other way and saw my friend swaying with a scared look on her face. I jokingly stumbled into the guy and put her on my back, like I was giving her a piggyback ride. She was notorious for freezing from a childhood trauma. I had done this before. I shot out of there, singing loudly, sounding like a crazy drunk person. The park was closing soon, and I ran to the gates. My legs started giving out as we reached near the front. My friend was slowly being able to move again when her mom waved us over. While we never told her mom or my mom, I asked my dad's friend, who had a daughter who worked for the corporation near the park. He often got us free passes, that I wanted to interview her for my English class. A week later, he gave me her number, and I called and immediately blurted out what happened and to please not tell my parents. I gave her all the details, and she told me not to worry. They would be fired and banned before the next day. Later, I went back to the park with a boyfriend that year and never saw either of those guys again. I was told that the park would keep them out of that kind of work environment forever, similar to blacklisting. I was so thankful she took me seriously. She told me she had worked at the park as a teenager as a certain character and had creepy dads do all kinds of sleazy crap to her. So she had a particular ire for that kind of crap. I feel if I had sobered up and put up a fight, there would have been terrible consequences. But that was just my gut feeling at the moment. I am still friends with that lady all these years later. We occasionally use that story to warn her kids and grandkids that bad things can happen anywhere, so be cautious. Case notes: the amusement park of horror. So this story is making me think about my time back in Montreal. We have an amusement park there called La Ronde. It's situated on St. Helens Island. It's a nice amusement park. There's many rides, not the largest roller coasters, but they're pretty good. There's one that's made purely of wood. Well treated, I guess, because it's still standing. I remember when I was like 12. There's always a smaller guy, small kid. I was so tiny, just the right height I could get on it, but I was so thin that the metal bars that come down to restrain you to keep you from, falling off. I was literally, in the descent period, floating in my seat. My mom was next to me and just looking around like, what is going on? Why is he floating in the seat? There was just too much room between the bar and my seat. It's so thin. I think my favorite ride there is Le Bateau Pirate.
It's a giant boat that swings back and forth, like that, kind of like a pendulum. I would always sit in the back of it, so I get the maximum effect. You swing down and up like that. It was very fun. So anyways, to get to the island, you have to travel, well, you can take a car, but if you just want to go there without a car, you have to take the metro, which is our subway system. It runs under the river, where this is an island situated between Montreal and Longueuil, and you take the metro to get there. You don't come out right at the amusement park, you have to take the bus. There's a small bus that just ferries you to the La Ronde. When the park closes, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m., depending on the day, then you take the bus back to the metro, and then the metro back to the city or to Longueuil. And I just mentioned this because I saw so many instances of guys and even one girl that just had no inclination to understand social boundaries, and they were probably all drunk. It's just confusing to me. I don't really understand alcohol. If this is how it makes people behave, why do they do it? I know it's supposed to be a social lubricant, but if you're going to behave that way, let's just say I feel comfortable enough without it, and I wouldn't want to be in a position where I couldn't have fun without losing my ability to control myself, if that makes sense. The nightlife, where you have alcohol everywhere, I guess it brings out who they really are and amplifies it. There's no filter, there's no internal barrier to prevent them from doing things that they know are probably not quite right, and they just do it anyways. It was very clever of you, though, to figure out a way to get out of the situation without actually physically fighting, because that could end up poorly. Good on you. Very clever.
Case file number 685, written by Miller's Left Shoe, The Inexplicable Mile-High Shortcut. This happened when I was flying back from New Zealand to Europe via Dubai, so the long flight was Auckland to Dubai in 2019. Haven't been able to make sense of it since. Usually, I'm an awful sleeper when on public transport. I'd been on long flights and bus rides before, and I never managed to shut an eyelid for longer than a few minutes. I'd wake up constantly in between because something was hurting, itching, I had to pee, etc. On my way to New Zealand, I slept for maybe 4 hours with a lot of waking up in between. It wasn't jet lag either, because this was the first half of the flight. There was nothing to be jet lagged about yet. So anyway, I was sitting next to this nice lady from Yorkshire who was considering moving to New Zealand for retirement. We shared life stories, spent quite a bit talking at the airport, where we'd met through coincidence, not knowing we'd sit next to each other. And when I decided to lean to the wall and listen to some music, the flight monitor told me there's 15 hours and 39 minutes to go. I put on my headphones, leaned back, closed my eyes, listened to around 3 songs, opened my eyes again, and suddenly the flight monitor was saying 5 hours and 30 minutes to go. It wasn't a monitor glitch, it really was only 5 more hours until we landed in Dubai. But I can't sleep for 10 hours. The lady next to me was in the same pose she'd been in before. I wasn't in a comfortable enough position to have slept. My phone was playing the same song it had been, at the same second mark. It hadn't even lost any battery percentage. I didn't have to go to the toilet despite drinking a lot before. My screen and app usage history, which I checked because I was confused as hell, hadn't gone up in minutes. There is no record of those 10 hours ever having passed. It was so weird. I'm a healthy young person, and there's no way I'd just pass out for 10 hours straight. But we couldn't have just taken a shortcut from Auckland all the way to Dubai. There is no shortcut through the air. I'm still looking for explanations and have none. Nothing similar ever happened since.
Case notes, file number 685. The Inexplicable Mile-High Shortcut. So glitches in the sky are just exciting to me. I always loved planes, even though I didn't fly too much in my life, only once or twice. But then you combine that with the time glitch, which are one of my favorites. We're off to the moon. I do wonder though, the woman next to you, did she perceive a time glitch too? Apparently in the comments in the thread, you mentioned that she didn't. She just said that she just woke up herself. So it makes you wonder, was the whole plane somehow induced into some kind of slumber? And how would that even be induced, and why? It doesn't seem likely. I mean, the flight attendants would be obviously suspicious if the whole plane suddenly falls asleep at the same time and can't be woken up. Or they themselves would fall asleep. And obviously the pilots didn't fall asleep because the plane is still there. I think there would be issues if pilots fell asleep for 10 hours straight. Just saying. And then everyone wakes up and they're all too nervous to talk about it. Maybe the woman next to you was just very nervous herself and lied, saying that she just woke up from a nap, but in reality for her, she just perceived that, yeah, time just skipped away. She lost 10 hours as well, but didn't want to come off as weird, so just brushed it away. Like, okay, it's just me being crazy, and obviously no one else felt this too. The alternative is you really did fall asleep, but for you it just passed like that. That happened to me one other time in my life. I was going to lay down, rested my head, closed my eyes, and in just a blink, a flash, it was 9 hours later. It was the most unsettling of feelings. It felt like this isn't how reality works. For me, normally it takes at least 20 minutes to fall asleep, maybe 30, depending on how tired I am. To be able to fall asleep instantly and have it feel like it's only a second, that's a superpower. I want that. Or just a button you can press, just fall asleep. I kind of have insomnia in a way. Not really. I can fall asleep, I never want to go to bed. Although when I'm sleeping, then I never want to wake up, so I don't know what's going on. Now, this is not likely unless your phone was plugged in. Because if your phone wasn't plugged in, well, the battery would have drained, or at least severely depleted after 10 hours. You know, all of this is making me think of a movie. It's not exactly related to glitches, just a good movie. It was Jodie Foster and Flight Plan, I think it was called, where she's in the plane, she's flying home to bring her husband back for a funeral, something like that. And she has her daughter with her. Obviously the daughter is sad, she's sad, they're all distraught. She rests her head, her daughter is beside her on the plane, mid-flight, and then she wakes up and the daughter is missing. And no one seems to realize that she was there, no one remembers her being there. The flight attendants can't help her. She's not on the manifest of the plane, apparently. It's a really good movie. You should check it out if you like mysteries.
Case file number 686, written by Moonlit Crystal, Garbage Bags and Ghosts. My husband passed away on April 5th. Ever since then, I've had some strange things happen. Let me first say that I was the only person in my apartment when these things happened, and I was not under the influence of anything. The first thing was a plastic baggie incident. When I cleaned out his nightstand, I found tons of empty plastic baggies. I have no clue why he felt the need to keep them. I laughed and threw them out because I was preparing to move and certainly didn't have any use for them myself. I should mention that our bedroom was directly across the hall from the front door, so I had no need to walk through the house with the baggies. The next morning, I found an empty baggie sitting on my coffee table in the living room. I was sure I had not taken it in there. It couldn't have been one of my own baggies because it was a different size and brand than the ones I use. The second thing was a trash bag incident. I had a huge roll of black trash bags that I was using to pack most of my clothes and also used to bag up some stuff for Goodwill. One day, I went to grab a trash bag and the whole roll was just gone. I literally turned the apartment upside down because I moved, and I never found them anywhere. I know damn well I didn't throw them out. I needed them to pack up and move. The third thing was a joint incident. My husband enjoyed smoking a particular substance from time to time, and he had a small joint left over when he passed. I don't smoke it, so I had no reason to bother with it. One day I looked at the spot where I was keeping it, and it was gone. I'd love to think it was my husband giving me signs that he was okay, and that he's still with me. Creepy file number 32. Written by Miss Jessie, Crying Bait. I truly feel like I'm going insane. This has been occurring for months now, and what began as slight anxiety is now intense paranoia. Every night I hear my cat outside my window crying. Not meowing, crying. Cat owners will understand what I mean. The first night, I walked outside without hesitation and called my cat. When that didn't work, I worried his legs or paws may be hurt, which would explain the crying, so I went and searched for him with my phone flashlight. That detail is important because, as you probably know, phone flashlights are not very bright, so when I saw something moving in the bushes, it was impossible to tell if it was my cat or not. What I do know is that when I gave up and chalked up its behavior up to being a brat, because let's be real, what cat comes when they're called? And it's no stretch for him to whine for no reason. So I walked back inside my house to find my cat, curled up and sleeping on my couch. There's no way he somehow got past me walking through the door without my knowledge. But still, I brushed it off because I suppose anything is possible. It happened again about a week later, and by then I had forgotten about the first weird experience. Only when I looked to the foot of my bed and remembered my cat had been with me the entire time, it all came rushing back. I'm the girl who makes fun of horror movie characters for being stupid, so when I sauntered outside in morbid curiosity, let me honestly tell you I have never retrospectively hated myself more. I went to my window and the crying was so clear it had to be coming from within a few feet, but I didn't see anything. Which was strange because I definitely saw something the first night. It was around this time that the creepiness of it all hit me, and I all but ran back inside. I swore then that my cat lost his nighttime privileges and would be indoors by sundown, and I wouldn't investigate this anymore, naively thinking it would go away. It has just gotten worse. That was months ago, and the crying occurs almost nightly now. Barring a couple nights of feline rebellion, I've been vigilant about keeping him indoors at night, so I know for a fact that whatever I'm hearing is not my cat. It just sounds so realistic. Before you comment saying it was another cat, don't bother. I know what my cat sounds like. I'm a proud cat mom, and I can tell them apart from the neighborhood strays. I'm familiar with being cautious of baby cries outside your door at night because predators have been known to record them and bait women, essentially weaponizing their maternal instinct. But who does that with a cat? For that to work, not only would they have to know I have a cat, but also somehow gain access to a recording of his crying and play it back for me every night outside my window. Hello, nightmare. Has anyone experienced something similar? How did you make it stop? Is this goal just to rob me of sleep and peace of mind, or is it finally time for me to suck up my pride and see somebody because I'm officially insane? Case file number 687, written by Ulrich Loves Andrea, a glitch of the Aztek. Okay, so let me preface this by saying that since about 1999 to 2000, I've been getting accused of being places, having conversations I don't remember, etc. This other me always drives the same car that I have. I think the two of us have been swapping back and forth for 2 decades. Until this past autumn, it hadn't happened for several years. Then in October, I was getting phone calls or people telling me later they saw me somewhere and that they were calling me, but I ignored them. On to the main reason I came to post this. In November, I was in a horrible car accident. My best friend lives about a mile from me. We were leaving my house and heading to hers. She left about 2 minutes before me, her 12-year-old daughter with her. About a minute after I left, she called to tell me that she was stopping at the gas station and that I needed to get over into the right lane because there's a really bad accident blocking the left lane. She says it's weird because one of the vehicles in the accident looked exactly like mine. We hung up right before I went through an intersection about a quarter of a mile from the gas station and the intersection where the accident was. I set the phone next to me, and the next thing I know, I can only describe what is my soul or life force being forcefully sucked back into my body. My left leg is pinned under the dashboard and the windshield is on top of me. I was somehow instantly transported 6 blocks to an accident that happened before I was even on that street. My best friend and her daughter says there's no way this could have happened because they passed the accident while on the phone with me. The people who stopped to help all said they didn't know what happened and didn't see anything special. The street was full of cars. It was rush hour on a main street. When I say that my van was totaled, I mean that no one knows how I survived. I had to be cut out of it with the jaws of life. Once I was out of the hospital, I started noticing little things being just off. I just can't put my finger on what it is that's not right. I feel like I'm in a different reality, be it ever so slightly different. I think maybe my alternate me died and I lived. I don't know, but I can't figure out how the accident happened or how I went on from one intersection to another in a split second. How my best friend and her 12-year-old daughter saw it while they were on the phone with me telling me about it, and then it happened to me. This whole situation is driving me nuts, and maybe somewhere I have kids that are mourning their mother. Right before the accident was when several people said they saw me, and since the accident, no one has seen her, and I don't know if anyone ever will again. This is all just blowing my mind, and whenever I try to tell someone about it, they look at me like I need a padded room and 24/7 observation. I'd probably think that too if I didn't have independent witnesses. I absolutely can't believe I forgot this part. So, last year I filed my taxes and got my refund. but I needed to file an amendment and was told I'd get it by early August. August comes and goes and nothing happens. No one can tell me jack. I forget about it. This whole time, the van that was wrecked, I had a massive hole in the radiator, among other major things that were not worth fixing. The amendment was gonna get me a new car. Well, an accident happens. I can't leave my house for 3 months due to injury and panic attacks at the suggestion. February rolls around, and in the middle of the night, I see an envelope on the floor next to my bed. I open it, and it's the damn amendment check, finally. No one knows where it came from, and everyone swears it was never in the mailbox. Anyways, a few weeks prior to this, my best friend, same one from above, who works at a mechanic shop, casually mentioned she bought a 2001 Pontiac Aztek at a ridiculous price to resell there. My jaw drops. That vehicle is number 3 on my all-time list. I've literally wanted one since 2001. It has one owner, almost in brand new condition. I was fretting for 3 weeks how to get the money to buy it because they weren't going to hold it. Boom comes the check. At the exact same time, I can now leave my house. At the exact same time, that car shows up. If I had gotten it back in August, I probably would have fixed the van's problems because it would have been easier and cheaper. So all that crap happens with the accident, and then this was my silver lining. A vehicle that was only manufactured for 5 years and barely sold any, and was touted as the car that killed the Pontiac. Like, that was what made this whole thing even weirder. Plus I paid half what it was worth because of the hookup from my best friend. Basically paid for the repair to it that the owner didn't want to pay. These cars are going to be buried with me, y'all. So that's the weird story more than a coincidence. Rest of ending to the story. In all, it's perfectly timed madness. And honestly, if it meant I ended up with the Aztek, I'd do the whole thing over. Broken body and never having answers to all of it. I honestly posted this because I wanted to know if anyone else had a similar experience, and maybe not to feel so alone. Sincerely, thank you. Bonus file, written by Sis Goldhour. When even your money is haunted. So, I've had a few paranormal experiences in my life thus far. Some frightening stuff, but nothing that was actually dangerous in retrospect. I recently started a security job at a bank. I work overnight and monitor the entirety of the building's interior, as well as patrols of the exterior. The building is 6 stories, with only the bottom one actually being the functional bank. The upper floors are mainly untouched and outdated offices, with a few being rented by businesses. No one whatsoever is in the building at night, and surveillance doesn't cover the upper floors because they're so well separated from the bank. While doing my rounds of the upper levels and checking every unlocked room, for example bathrooms, closets, mechanical rooms, storage spaces, stairwells, the whole 9 yards, I didn't find anything as usual. But while I was on the 4th floor, I heard someone call my name and heard a door close. Of course, I was freaked out, but I pushed through the fear and tried to stay rational. I did a second sweep of the floor, and again, nothing. Then I got really scared. I got to the stairwell on the floor and opened the door to listen. Stairwells echo really badly, so we're taught to be silent and listen for intruders. While I'm standing there, with my head peeked through the door, I don't hear anything. Until I do. 2 men's voices come from the stairwell, I'm assuming. I announced myself and started up, but found nothing and didn't hear any doors open or close, which I should have. Then I'm at the last flight up to the roof and I heard loud footsteps running up the stairs. I'm absolutely terrified at this point and prepare myself for physical altercation. Weapon at the ready, I wait for the perp to come to me because I'm on high ground. The steps sound close enough that I should be able to see the person causing them, but I don't. Then I hear labored breathing with the steps and still see nothing. Next thing I know, I'm physically pushed back. I didn't fall very far, more like collapsed into the steps behind me. The sounds continue to the roof door, and to my shock it opens with a bang, and then shuts. I actually saw it open and shut. It's normally locked, so I go to secure it and call the cops, but when I get to it, it's locked again. I have absolutely no explanation for this. I've never been pushed or physically touched by an entity, and I'm shaking badly. On top of this, the next night I'm sitting in the lobby with elevators behind me. Again, no one in the building. and I hear the outdated elevator go up some floors, stop, and shift with weight entering it, then come back down. I'm absolutely terrified as it touches down and the doors open. No one in sight, but when I got up to look closer, something stepped towards me, pushed me over again, then ran up the stairwell adjacent to the elevator. I'm terrified of this building. I'm the first female guard they've hired, newer company. The men I've spoken to don't experience anything. It pays too good to quit, but I'm at a loss of what to do.
Case notes. Bonus file. When even your money is haunted. So, reading this story, I actually get a lot of vibes of, not paranormal, but of someone scouting out the bank. Now, of course, you ask, well, how could they be doing that if it's a real person? Do they have advanced cloaking technology? Which, to my knowledge, isn't actually something anyone can just buy. If anyone had that kind of technology, it would be government related. But what would they be doing scouting out some random bank? Why would they care? Maybe there's some important documents or technology that's hidden away in one of the safety deposit boxes. Just speculating. I really don't know why someone would scout out some random bank if they had technology that advanced. It is theoretically possible though. By using cameras and computers embedded in a suit, you could project the image from behind to the front, and then you'd have a sort of cloaking technology. But it wouldn't work exactly perfectly. At certain angles, the image wouldn't be able to match the perception of the person looking at it, which is a serious problem. So you would probably be able to perceive that it wasn't a ghost, it would be a human, just depending on the angles. The few things that lead to this point though, the first is that you don't report any sensations of being cold or lights flickering. I don't know if anything like this exists. It is a cool idea, I hope it does. Depending on who's using it, of course. But yeah, you only reported sounds, weird sounds, and then no one's there. And voices too. So that could be a real person. The other thing is that to get to the door they had to go through you. They pushed you out of the way for some reason. If it was a ghost, why would they care? Why would they just randomly push someone and then just disappear through a door? To open and close it too, why not just phase through the door? Just to mess with you? I guess it's possible. Maybe the bank is haunted by a poltergeist and who's just having fun with you. But I don't know. That doesn't quite fit in my mind. Not inconceivable, but I think there's something a bit more mundane, but technologically awesome. Something like that.
Case file number 688, written by Nick, crashing into another universe. This story is very bizarre, and I'm not going to give you the backstory of how I ended up in the situation I was in, because it was a very traumatic experience. Anyways, I ended up jumping out of a vehicle and running as fast as I could to get away from someone. I ran to the first car I saw, and it had the keys in it. Let me just say, I don't steal other people's cars other than for the reason of the ordeal I was going through. This was an emergency. I drove erratically to hopefully get someone to call the police so I could get pulled over and receive help because the person I was running from was directly behind me. Once the police finally got behind me, I went to pull over, but something happened with the steering wheel and I went off into a ditch that was extremely deep, crashing the car. All I remember was being sat on by some police officer and being so scared for my life that I couldn't speak. I was in shock. They didn't ask what I was doing or even why I stole the car to begin with, so I stayed quiet and I went to jail. After I got bonded, I went home and started noticing everything was off. Nothing was the same anymore. My mother and brother, who I was having issues with, are different now. They treat me so well. For example, my brother would cuss me out and talk down to me all the time. He never told me he loved me. All of a sudden I would say, "I love you, brother." And he would reply, "I love you too, sister, good night." Or, "I love you, be safe." For example, I asked him if I could borrow $20. He said, "For what?" I said, "Because I really like to read and I'm out of coins." He said, "All right, but I need it back." I was in shock because he used to be so greedy and I'm used to him saying something nasty like, "Go sell yourself if you want it that bad." Not anymore. He doesn't do that anymore. My mother is being the mother she never was before. It's like I have a different, more loving brother and mother. Things also changed with my dad. We aren't close anymore. He was my everything, but not anymore. I started noticing things were different in movies I watched. So for months and months, I kept putting in keywords of what I was experiencing, and the Mandela effect came up. I jumped with joy when I saw that millions of people are going through what I'm going through, because I almost committed myself into a psychiatric ward over this. I think I died the day I crashed my car and shifted into this reality. Let me say that I was not on drugs, but had experienced a traumatic experience with someone who wouldn't let me leave his side, and that's why I jumped out of the first vehicle and stole the car to begin with. One more thing. If your life is in danger, do whatever it takes to survive your attacker, even if it means stealing a car. I did my year in county jail, and I'd do it again if I had to, because at least I survived. Case notes for file 688. Crashing into another universe. So I would agree that it's very probable that you did actually die in the crash, going at high speed into a ditch. Maybe the airbags didn't deploy for some reason, or maybe just the shock of it created a hemorrhage in your brain. And those are just two ways that I'm thinking off the top of my head. Said before, but the human body is very fragile. There's like 61 million people that die every single year worldwide. That's a staggering number. You think it'd be a lot less than that, but that's a lot of people. Of course, tons of people being born, so the net is still positive, but that's so many people dying. It's truly wild. Although there is a possible mundane explanation, in that maybe just being in that crash and then having a traumatic event, but also going to prison or jail, maybe it changed the mindset of your brother and mother. Maybe it made them more welcoming of you and cherishing the moments they have, and maybe trying to just be nicer to you, to give you a better life experience. Not sure why your dad would pull away in this case, and it wouldn't explain why you don't remember movie details the way they are now. I was rewatching Total Recall recently, the original. The remake is okay, but it doesn't compare to the original. There's a vibe there that cannot be replicated. A certain je ne sais quoi, the magic. It's a reflection on how memory can be falsified and how fickle it can be. Obviously, we don't have machines that can alter it directly, not in that way, not that we know of anyways. There's also an episode of Stargate SG-1 where this happens to Colonel Mitchell, in that he's on an alien world and they have this device where they can implant or remove memories from, and very specific ones too. Like they craft a scene like you would a movie and then implant it in. It could be a fake memory, could be real memories too. It's an appealing technology if you could train people to be fighter pilots or doctors or whatever in a few hours instead of years. That's a huge benefit, obviously. Just transport their memories, not just knowledge, but their very experience of these people. That's tremendously powerful. But the same applies if it's a false memory that's implanted in a way that is shocking and traumatic, like killing someone, which is what happened to Colonel Mitchell. But the entire time, even knowing it wasn't a real memory, it's hard not to believe it. It's hard to doubt your own mind. To lose faith in your own mind, that'd be the easiest way to go crazy. But in your case, I don't think that's what happened. I do think the most probable answer is you died and quantum immortality, whoop, zapped you away, and now you're in a different, slightly altered universe. But it's always good to consider mundane possibilities, because not everything is going to be an actual glitch. Hard to say sometimes, but this one's pretty clear-cut. And I'm happy for you that you reconnected with your brother and mother. Family's important. I hope you can remedy whatever it is that's off with your dad now. Reconnect there too. Bring the whole family back together. That would be great. Bonus file, written by October Mindset. An afterlife spent in the kitchen. I was working a part-time job at a church at the time, and it was at the end of the day, so I was cleaning up and getting ready to lock up for the day. For context, this church is very old. There are graves on the property from the 1860s, and the place has burned down twice. I go to the church's kitchen to grab my lunch bag from the fridge, and when I walk through the door, in the corner of my eye, I see a woman at the counter to my right. I thought it was my boss, but the fridge was straight ahead, so I walked forward and grabbed my stuff. I turned around and there was no one there now. I was alone in the kitchen, and the door did not open, but there was someone there. I made a conscious effort not to look because I'm kinda socially awkward. I thought about it and realized that the woman was wearing a white dress with a pink floral pattern on it. How on earth could that be my boss, who only wears jeans and sweaters? Freaked out, I went outside and locked up the church and told my friend about it, who's been going to the church for a long time. He told me that people joke about it being haunted, but there's no way you saw a ghost in broad daylight like that. It's a light playing tricks on your eyes." After my job was done, I forgot about the interaction until I got a text from my friend. He said, "Bro, was that woman you saw working at the counter wearing a white dress with a pink floral pattern?" I never described the ghost to him before, so we both saw the same woman in the kitchen, cooking. Our theory is that back in the day, the woman would do all the work in the kitchen for church services. She must have been buried in the church grounds and she was stuck there working in the kitchen for decades or even a century. Creepy file number 33, written by an old truth teller. By the way, this isn't my laptop. I was on a plane once and noticed that although people were still boarding, there were a large number of seats around me unoccupied. The last people on, though, were all together and consisted of one large family traveling together. There were 4 adults and about 10 children, ranging from toddler age to high school and young adult. They had the usual look of a large group traveling with children, some of whom were shy and withdrawn, others who were running around, and the adults looking frazzled, trying to keep everyone and everything together. When they'd all been seated, there seemed to be some issue with the seating, as one member of their party was supposed to sit several rows back. The flight attendant apologized and said that it happens, that sometimes their computer will shuffle sequential seating, etc., but assured them that there was seating available for everyone. The family sat down, -1, and started with the usual, "That's a shame, wish they could sit up here," talk. Since it seemed that their party was surrounding me, I stopped the flight attendant and asked her if I could switch seats with another passenger. This caught the attention of the large group, perhaps anticipating a complaint, but the flight attendant told me no, they don't usually do that, and that everyone has been seated already, but asked if there was a problem with where I was sitting. I explained to her that I was traveling solo and did not care where I sat, and asked if I could give my seat to the member of the family who was absent, as my seat would have been put in the midst of the group anyways. The family overheard and was thanking me as I retrieved my bag overhead and followed the flight attendant to the family member's seat. She explained what was happening, and I noticed that the family member, a young girl maybe 12 years old, seemed in a hurry to get back to her family and thanked me 4 times. She practically ran up the aisle, and before I could sit down, the man who'd been sitting next to her was literally staring with his mouth open and asked, "What's the problem?" No, that girl was sitting here first. Red flag number 1. And the flight attendant explained to him what was happening, and he immediately looked at me and said, "No, I don't want to sit next to him. Where's that girl going?" She explained to him that there was no issue and she couldn't do anything else now. I think she was getting the same vibe as me. Now, I want to assure everyone that I'm not in the habit of judging people by their appearance, but this guy was the definition of red flags. He was overweight and paunchy. That overweight with no muscle tone look that some people have. Half bald with a few strands combed over, thick glasses and no chin. He was a mouth breather and kept his mouth open constantly, drooling on himself and then sucking it back in between heavy breathing. If there was a textbook example of a creep, it would be him. As I was putting my bag overhead, he started talking to himself under his breath about how this was BS, just my luck. Wasn't bothering anybody, and why did they move that girl? I wanted to say something to him but didn't. It wasn't long before my neighbor got a call and was talking about an upcoming court appearance, and I overheard, "No victim's testimony," and "rarely show up," and people wouldn't ask me to babysit if I was like that. The only time I said anything to him was when he started blatantly watching porn on his laptop with earphones in, grunting, sweating, wheezing, and kept repeating, "Little bitch," when a part was on that he evidently liked. Then took a blanket and covered his lap, with hands fidgeting underneath. As soon as I saw that he intended on keeping them there, I pretended to reach for the call button. Then he jerked his hands out and started muttering under his breath about me minding my own business. At some point, I got up to use the restroom, and when I returned, he was on his phone again, and I caught something about the butt on her. No. Switched seats on me. Got away, and he shut up as he saw me approaching. The creep went on to sleep eventually, and fortunately stayed asleep for the rest of the flight. When we were all deboarding, a woman I presume was the mother was standing with the girl and said, "Thank you again. I shuddered to think how he acted in the short time she was next to him, or what he would have done had she remained there. Shocking absolutely no one, including himself, he was met at the gate by security and police. As he was being led away, he said, "This isn't my laptop, by the way." Case file number 689, written by Usarina 16. A glitch of crumpled metal. I was 17, I'm 34 now, dating a boy named Alex from high school, and he asked me if I wanted to cheer him on at a Magic the Gathering tournament. It was supposed to run from 8 to midnight, and my dad told me to be home by 12:30. The tournament ran too late. It was 2 a.m. before it ended. I finally turned on my phone and was immediately called by my irate father to get home now and that I was grounded. My boyfriend was pissed despite winning his tournament at being rushed. He drove erratically down the street and was running stop signs and even a red light. I saw headlights as we ran through. I heard the screech of the tires and even the crumple of the metal. I was meant to die in that crash. I braced myself hard and closed my eyes. Next thing I knew, we were through the intersection and not a scratch on the car. I got home, threw Alex under the bus and thanked my dad for his anger as it unleashed careless behavior from my then boyfriend. I broke up with him shortly after, as he never admitted his behavior was reckless. Case file number 690, written by Weird News 3634. They seemed normal, but they weren't human. So I'm not exactly a paranormal believer per se, but I've had a couple of experiences while hunting or hiking that I just can't explain rationally. The most unnerving one happened probably 7 or 8 years ago. Normally, I'd hunt on some property that my family owns. I don't even remember the reason anymore that I decided to hunt on public land this time. Probably just a change of scenery. I remember that it was evening in fall, but it was a fairly uncharacteristically warm day. I got to the access road and pulled off to the spot where everyone pulls off to park and walk in, and noticed there were a couple of old boys already there. Nothing too weird about them, except there is no truck or vehicle for them to have pulled in on. They also didn't have guns with them, but they were dressed in hunter orange. But at the time, I just figured that they were backpackers or campers. There's not too far from this spot than a campground, and it's not uncommon for folks to spend weekends away from their family for some peace and quiet for their hunting trip. Anyways, they seemed friendly enough, and there was absolutely nothing said to make them seem any different than hundreds of other fellows I've met while hunting. They were just a couple of hillbillies from the sounds of it. We shot the crap for a couple of minutes. They took off, and I sat on my phone for a bit, trying to give them a head start, because I was afraid they'd drive off the squirrels. Except I clearly didn't wait long enough. Probably like 10 minutes up the trail, it curved to the left, but I heard noises coming directly from ahead. It sounded bigger than a squirrel, but I also like seeing any sort of animal, and it didn't sound too far off the main path. When I crept off the path, the ground started to drop, so I was able to look down and see my new pals, but not acting right at all. This is going to be hard to explain without a visual. But they weren't just moving like normal people. Their movements were jerky, and it's almost like they'd forgotten that things like knees and other joints were able to bend. They were more rigid than I can describe. I didn't stick around long, because frankly it was freaking terrifying. I backed away slowly and quietly to the trail, and then hauled my butt back to my car. I've spoken with several of the more open-minded outdoorsmen in the area, and none of them have ever heard of anything like that. Drugs were the most common theory that I've heard, and I know that's a logical assumption, but man, I've seen folks on a lot of different drugs and those movements just look too scarily unnatural. I've done some Googling in the years since for similar incidents in my area, but I've yet to find anything that sounds like this. How could human beings be that rigid? It's impossible. Case notes, file number 690. They weren't human. Finally, it's been a while since I had a case where I can really say, this is aliens, definitely. And if you give it a few moments of thought, it's not inconceivable that aliens would have the technology to basically construct meat suits, for lack of a better word, of human beings and inhabit them, either by transferring their consciousness into the body,
or just building a body that mimics it and they control it from afar. So it's sort of like a Terminator robot thing. And it's not inconceivable because any aliens capable of reaching us, either from another solar system or from another higher dimension, would be so far beyond us in technology, it's almost incomprehensible. It'd be like trying to imagine a color that doesn't exist. Oh, good luck with that. And why would they want to do that? Well, to study us. I'm reminded of a movie, Star Trek Insurrection, where they're trying to examine a lower species. They don't have warp capability, but they appear to be immortal. Interesting. And they just want to learn more about them, so they camouflage themselves into like a bunker in the side of a rock, and they're just observing this little town to see how they behave, their culture, how they think, how they talk, their language, and all that. In this case though, well, why would aliens limit themselves to one small geographic location when they could just build a body, inhabit it or remotely control it, and then live with us and really get the feel of who we are and how we live? Presumably if they're intelligent and not out to kill us, well, that's the whole purpose of studying. Unless you're trying to conquer, well, you just want to know who they are. It's what I would do if I had the technology and we could actually explore other worlds and we found real life there, but wasn't quite advanced enough to interact with us on the same level. You still want to get to know them, even though you can't make your presence known, or at least not directly. But I do wonder, what were they doing alone in the forest? If they are indeed aliens, they obviously aren't hunting. Maybe they're just studying the wildlife, the vegetation. Maybe it's not just humans are interested in. Maybe the planet, Earth, is more interesting and rare than we think. And maybe they're sort of caretakers for this planet and living things on it. I like that idea. It gives a new meaning to Guardian Angel. Maybe we need to rename it to Guardian Alien.
Creepy file number 34. Written by Medium Ticket 9574. A Midday Abduction. I had been staying at a motel while on a business trip in Mobile, Alabama. One day, I decided to walk to Zaxby's for lunch. It was only a short distance across the street from the motel, near a pretty busy intersection, so a young woman felt pretty secure doing that in the middle of the day. As I was just exiting the hotel's parking lot, about to begin to cross the street, not in a crosswalk, I noticed an older-style rust-orange-colored, perhaps Chevy Chevelle, or maybe Oldsmobile Cutlass. Sorry, I don't really know old cars. Pulled into the empty parking lot across the street, exactly where I would have been heading if I stayed on my current trajectory. I remember thinking it was a weird place to park your car, because he had parked the vehicle only in the entrance of this empty parking lot, not in a parking spot. Then I noticed a tall, heavier-set man step out of the driver's seat and walk to the trunk. Open the trunk, stand to the side of the open trunk, and just look at me as I'm getting closer and closing the distance between us. Every alarm bell in my body is going off in my head as a really bizarre thing he is doing. But at this point, I'm exactly halfway across the street in the middle of the road and realize I'm going to have to be the annoying one who very obviously changes her course to avoid walking any closer to this man. I decided I'd take the chance of looking like that person and immediately U-turn my body back to the motel side of the street. During this time of changing my direction, this man gets back into his car and pulls across the street directly in front of me and into the entrance of the motel parking lot that I'm about to pass and looks straight at me with his window about 2 inches down. After seeing the way he's looking at me, I very quickly change directions yet again and quickly walk back across the street and make a beeline for Zaxby's. Anyone watching would have witnessed me zigzagging across the street about 3 times if memory serves me. Anyway, I didn't get kidnapped, but I think that was his intention, and that was creepy as hell. Case file number 691, written by Prometheus Titan God. Do you think that's air you're breathing? I don't know if the powers that be consider this a glitch, but it goes with my theory. If we are in a simulation, then its true power over us is that we believe certain things are unbreakable laws of reality. But what if you don't know or think about those laws? Can they be bent or broken? Quick example, not the main glitch, but one of many I have seen. Then I will tell you my most recent one. When I was 19 or 20, I worked at a fast food restaurant, as most kids do starting out in life. I worked with a wide variety of people, teens, ex-military, a few ex-cons, and elderly people who needed to supplement their retirement. Well, this elderly coworker was working the fryer with boiling oil. I saw him go to wipe sweat off his forehead, and he knocked his glasses into the fryer. It was on at full temperature, and he, without thinking, reached into the boiling oil up to his elbow and took out his glasses. I rushed to him, expecting him to be badly burned. Not even a light burn, nothing. His arm hairs weren't even singed. Sure, he was covered in hot oil, but not even slightly burned. I called him Superman after that. Now to the main glitch, one I experienced recently. At my job, we have these extremely heavy 8-foot by 4-foot bamboo sheets. They weigh around 150 to 250 pounds each, depending on style and thickness. A stack slid off a container truck like a stack of cards onto a coworker's leg. There were at least 6 panels on his leg, close to 1,000 pounds or more, pinning him to the ground. You could hear his bones starting to crackle under the weight as more started to slide onto his leg. God, the sound, it was like when you bend a tree branch and it starts to crack and break. I first tried to lift them off, but obviously I couldn't because it was a ton of weight. Seeing the agony on his face as more weight shifted onto his leg, I went into an autopilot mode. I was aware, but wasn't. I've heard athletes call it a flow state or being in the zone. What I did next still gives me chills. I squatted down and said, once the pressure is off, it's going to hurt like hell. Don't think, just move your leg out. I then lifted the sheets up off him. I lifted them a good 8 to 12 inches. I didn't realize at this point several other coworkers saw me do this. They came over after they heard his scream of pain. They kept their distance. I did it with 2 hands, but he couldn't move his leg. I then lifted it up even more and held it up till he got his leg free. How the hell did I do that? I didn't think about it until they asked me how I lifted close to 1,000 pounds like it was nothing. I said I didn't know because I don't. The guy was bleeding like a stuck pig. Blood was pouring out like a faucet. I then grabbed masking tape and paper towels. At this point, every single person in the company was hounding us on their phones. I said, okay, this is going to hurt. Don't punch me, okay? I stopped his bleeding, making a tourniquet out of paper towels and that blue painter's tape. While in my autopilot mode, police and a dozen people were watching and talking as the ambulance arrived. The police spoke to me. So you lifted that stack there? He asked, pointing to the spot. I said, yeah. Okay, how? I said I didn't know. Well, what the others reported as well. I'm not a huge hulking man, not fat, but do have a moderate amount of muscle. Most people don't notice until I take my shirt off, something I rarely do in front of people. I am fairly muscular, but not enough to lift that. They assume because I'm 51, graying hair, and a little too many wrinkles for my age, that I'm weak and feeble. Even with this, I'm not Superman, nor do I have gamma-mutated blood. I guess it's possible I have a dormant X gene. I say in jest, but I shouldn't be able to lift that much weight so easily, even using leverage and adrenaline. I was told the ER doctor asked who wrapped his leg. They said some guy in the warehouse, aka me. He said I saved his leg and maybe even his life. He had the major artery in his leg damaged and would have bled out if I didn't do that. Several things I need to say. I hate the sight of blood. Even just thinking about it now makes me queasy. I was covered with his blood. It didn't even faze me at the time. Sure, we all heard stories of mothers, fathers, and people lifting heavy weights off a loved one. But honestly, I don't even like this guy that much. There's no connection there. He is my coworker, but he was a huge pain in my butt. He thinks he's smarter than everyone, but he's far from anything I call intelligent. What happened to him was totally an example of this. I repeatedly told him not to stand by that unsafe stack of bamboo, and don't touch it. He thinks he's smarter than my 30+ years of warehouse experience. Went up to that stack and pushed it like he was going to straighten out the stack, causing it to fall on him. Yeah, as I said, not too bright. So I know some won't believe this, but multiple witnesses saw it. A police report was filed and a company investigation for insurance reasons was made. The police emergency responders and insurance agents and the company owner all asked how the hell did I lift that much weight. The EMTs kept asking me if I needed medical attention because given my age and the weight I lifted, they were concerned I may have hurt myself and didn't realize it yet. But I was fine, not even a sore muscle. I clearly don't recommend people think they are able to do superhuman stuff just because they believe they can or something, but I think some of us glitch, some of us are rogues or oddballs, the thing that throws us out of sync with reality. The things that make us aware of or cause glitches can perhaps make certain unbreakable universal laws more flexible at times. Oh, and my coworker took 3 months to recover. He has a huge scar and some nerve damage in his leg, but he's back to work being his normal annoying pain in the butt self. But now when he truly gets me mad, I just say, be careful, because the next time I might count to 20 before I actually save your life again.
Case notes for file 691. Do you think that's air you're breathing? So for the first part of the story regarding the hot oil and sticking your arm in it, well, there's an effect where if you have a lot of water that's covering your arm or hand or whatever you're putting in hot oil, immediately as soon as it comes into contact with the hot oil, it's going to flash evaporate. And this is going to create a vapor barrier between the hot oil and your skin. So for a second or two, if you have a lot of water covering your arm or hand, you can stick your hand into hot oil or liquid nitrogen and nothing will happen. It doesn't last very long, but it is a way to do it without getting hurt. And you did mention that your coworker wiped his brow, his forehead, to remove sweat. So it's possible that some of that sweat came into contact with his skin, stuck to his skin, and that created this vapor barrier. The only thing is it's like an exaggeration of physics, where this is a physical effect that can occur, but rubbing sweat onto your arm shouldn't be enough, especially to coat the opposite side of the arm, and it shouldn't really apply to his hand either. So one side would be protected, but the other side wouldn't be. It's like the effect was amplified somehow. And then regarding lifting this weight that shouldn't be physically possible. Well, as you mentioned, there are plenty of stories where people are able to rescue their loved ones or random people sometimes, just by lifting more weight than should be physically possible. Certainly more weight than they can lift in the gym. And how they do this is our minds actually limit our capability to lift weight, because generally we don't need to be as strong as our maximum capacity day in, day out. We'd risk getting injured more than anything else. But in rare cases where that kind of strength is required, the brain unlocks the muscle capacity and then we're able to lift more than we ever thought possible. The thing is, again, this is amplified. So people will lift 200, 300, 400 pounds when they could lift 100 pounds. But in your case, maybe you could lift 200. You shouldn't be able to lift 1,000. That should be physiologically impossible, even with the unlock from your brain. So, and you said you did it easily and without any injury. That's another thing to consider, is that when people lift way more weight than they're supposed to be able to, they often are very injured. I mean, think about all the injuries you get in the gym just lifting ordinary weight that the brain is restricting you from being able to lift more. Your ligaments, your joints, your bones, they're not used to being able to lift that kind of weight. So in all cases where people are in an emergency lifting way more weight than they should be able to, they get injured after. But you didn't even have a sore muscle. So what's going on there? It's truly fascinating. Maybe you do have an X gene.
Case file 692, written by Lucid Nightmares. The Lady with the Vacuum. I want to say I was like 8, maybe 9, and I was playing in a small park with my brother. We were climbing a tree, and I, who was stupidly wearing rain boots, fell head first and got my leg caught between 2 branches. It twisted my knee pretty badly. Bad enough where it still affects me a bit to this day. My brother lifted me out and ran home to get my mom. He hadn't brought his phone. When he was gone and I was sitting alone crying in the forest, this is where it gets a bit weird. A lady appeared out of nowhere. She was black and had kinda poofy black hair that was short and kind of hugged her head. She was carrying a vacuum in a purple box. When she saw me crying, she sat next to me and talked me down. She asked what happened and I told her, along with telling her how my brother had to run to get our mom. Well, after about 5 minutes, my mom appears to grab me. The lady was gone. My mom has no recollection of seeing anybody with me, nor does my brother. She is embedded into my memory, and I never met anyone that looked like her before, nor have I since. Who was the lady with the vacuum? Case file number 692, written by a fellow viewer, Dean Martin. The Helicopter Frozen in Time. Here's a collection of 3 small stories from our very own Dean Martin. Story 1. This is a glitch with my brother, where I wrote to my other brother. But I had another incident with him. About 2 months or so ago, I wrote via text to him. We were supposed to play Pokemon together, so I wrote to him in the evening. He didn't reply, so I thought his job was running late. About an hour after the first text, I called him. He didn't take it, so I waited a little and called again. But this time he took it, or should I say, he took it. I said, "Hello?" I heard noise and scratching sounds, and after what seemed like 2 minutes, he screamed and hung up. It was so loud it scared me. I tried calling back, and I called him a total of 16 times and 2 times on Facebook too. And with every call, I was talking to him, and each time he would scream. But finally, I got a hold of the real him and told him. He said it first. "Sorry, didn't pick up. My job was running late, and I was talking to my dad," I answered. "There's no way." And then I told him everything. I even sent a picture to him showing him the calls I made, and then he went silent. He said, "I didn't get anything." He then sent me a picture showing nothing on his end of his phone, not a single call registered, but he did get those 2 on Facebook, but couldn't answer, which he told me. But I was talking to someone even on Facebook, so what the hell happened, and why was that person screaming? Story 2. I was out driving with my wife to a thrift store when out of the window I saw a helicopter. It was in the air, flying around, but when I stared at it, it seemed to be in place. Like it was not moving, it was stuck in midair. Then I told my wife, but she didn't see it. She did say, "Cool, where is it?" I told her, but as soon as I did, a tree blocked the path. I said that to her as well, but it didn't matter, because she could see it in 30 seconds, but she didn't. It was in the air, but every time she was about to see, a tree would block her view. We were turning right when the helicopter was about to be in view, which I said to my wife, and I saw it in the air, but then suddenly it vanished. I was looking at the sky and just stared. This whole sequence was maybe 3 seconds long. My wife asked, "Well, where is it?" "Well, it's gone." She sighed, but when I told her what happened, she believed it, because she knows what's happening. Story 3. What happened is really weird on this one. My wife and I were out walking in the woods near us, looking for some plants, when I heard something. At first, it sounded like the wind, and I didn't want to say anything to my wife because it would seem crazy. But as we were walking and stopped, the noise became louder, just little by little. It sounded like people, like many people, all talking over each other. I thought, screw it, and asked my wife, "Did you hear that?" And she said, "Yes, I thought it was only me and didn't want to say anything." I said the same thing to her. We kept hearing those sounds of people talking when no one was around, and it became louder and louder. We looked at each other and looked all over, but no one was near us. The woods were empty, the sun was setting slowly, and we got scared and called it a day and went home. We still talk about it and can't find an explanation for it other than a glitch. We did go back eventually, but nothing strange happened that time. Case notes. File number 692. The helicopter, frozen in time. So this first story actually sounds very familiar. It's like I read a story extremely notable in its similarities. I think though, it wasn't a scream. The person that I read the story from was describing, I think it was their brother as well, or maybe a close friend. And they were calling them. They answered eventually. And when they answered, they were speaking in some foreign, unknown language. It almost sounded alien or demonic or something. In your case, it's just this weird scratching sound, and then your brother screams and doesn't remember doing any of this. And most notably, there's no record of the calls going through on your brother's end. So if you did connect, and there's a mundane explanation, your call went through to some other person that decided to prank you. So was this somehow an elaborate electronic prank? How would they intercept a call this way? Maybe it was an interception from a higher power, or a lower power. And the second story, I've also narrated a story similar to it, where it wasn't a helicopter, it was a plane in the sky that appeared to be frozen in time, like a temporal bubble. You would see it, in this case it was at night. I think the person was going out to bring his garbage out to the bin, and then he saw this plane frozen, seemingly stuck in the sky, for no apparent reason. And it was just sitting there for I think over a minute. In your case, the crazy thing happened within the span of 3 seconds. You saw it,
frozen still, and then it just vanished. There was no time to land, wasn't even moving anyways. Makes you wonder, are there temporal bubbles in the sky or in space-time? Not just the sky, could be anywhere on the planet, where if you enter it, you don't even realize you're in this temporal bubble. Time is essentially frozen for you. Relative to the outside world, there's no time passing for you. You know what? There was a recent case where there was this person that was on a plane and he lost track of time. It seemed like time just skipped by. He was sleeping, but it didn't seem like he fell asleep, and then many hours passed. What if there are temporal bubbles where in a moment you're trapped in it, you don't realize it, and it seems like you just zip on by, because after you're outside of the temporal bubble, you are moved along to where you should have been, given you would have traveled through time normally. So it's sort of like a freeze frame of space-time, but then it resets itself. Almost like there's not enough processing power for the server to handle. I guess it could be a way to save on crashing the whole server, where you just freeze a certain segment of it and give more processing power to other locations that need it. The third story just sounds like a sort of collective haunting of a specific location in the forest. It is odd though that when you went back, there was nothing abnormal. So if these entities were still there, if there were echoes or ghosts, maybe they moved on. And I probably wouldn't have gone back myself. That seems a bit terrifying. You're both very brave.
Case file number 693, written by Armored Meerkat. The Kissing Entities. The Hat Man. This happened in Budapest, Hungary, in the early 90s. There was no internet, and I never heard of the Hat Man before. I woke up at midnight and was not able to move. Classic sleep paralysis. All of a sudden, I felt something truly evil in the room. It was dark and I was not able to see the corner, but I knew someone or something was standing in the dark corner. In my mind, I saw a tall man with a wide cowboy hat, long leather coat, just like a Western outlaw. I felt the menace coming from him, whatever it was. I would have written it off as a nightmare or sleep paralysis if my cat would not have climbed the curtain and was not hissing and spitting like crazy right at it. Even though this happened over 20 plus years ago, I still get the shivers if I think of it. Kissing Entities. I lived alone at the time and was working a closing shift at a restaurant, arriving home past midnight and just chilling for a while before dozing off. As I was drifting off to sleep, I felt a gentle hand stroking the top of my head and felt a light kiss on my forehead. I was not able to move to turn around to see who or what it was. My heart was filled with the purest love and felt happy, but in a strange, blissful and calm happiness. A year or so later, I had my apartment remodeled and all the furniture was pulled into the middle of the room. My mom had the habit of coming to check on me unannounced. I wanted to have a nap before my shift, so I left the key in the lock. We had the old-fashioned skeleton keys, so the door could not be opened from the outside. As I was drifting off again, I heard a key rattling in the lock. I was thinking, great, Mom is here, but knew she would not be able to get in because the key was inside. Then I hear footsteps. I was wondering how was she able to get inside. Again, I feel the gentle stroke on my head and a kiss. Same blissful euphoria. Never happened again. I miss my kissing entities. Creepy file number 35, written by Chocolate Chip Wizard, The Brown Van. This happened a long time ago, in the early 70s, on the rural outskirts of a small satellite town of Detroit. Back in those days, kids wandered freely, and more or less without knowledge or fear of the dangers every child knows about these days. Stranger danger was not a thing kids at the time were taught in school. I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, a nearsighted, neglected girl child of parents too immersed in their own misery to bother with parenting. So while I knew firsthand how dangerous family could be, I had no fear of strangers. I was walking home from the bus stop. I remember it was a warm, pleasant, sunny day. The road was a dirt one, solely residential, and the houses were all situated below the crown of a hill out of sight from the road. I was about a city block from home when a brown truck pulled up, looking, to my poor vision at least, like a UPS delivery van. Inside the truck, I could see 3 people. One was a girl in her 20s with long, straight blonde hair, who very much resembled my older sister or the girl on Mod Squad, a common look in those days. There was a young man with the kind of dirty, bearded Jesus look that was just common at the time. And the third, I think, was kind of shadowed, hard to make out in the interior of the truck. One of them said, "We have a package for your parents. Get in and show us where your house is." Though I had no fear of strangers at the time, I was a logical little cuss. When I did interact with adults, I usually annoyed them by just saying it like it was, so I answered, "My parents' house is right there," pointing down the road. "You can follow me if you want to." They tried for several minutes to persuade me to get into the delivery truck. I just couldn't understand why these stupid adults wouldn't simply follow me a couple doors down so they could make their delivery. I turned away from the truck and walked along the edge of the road towards my house, thinking they would just follow me and deliver their package, but the van drove off. No delivery attempted. Now looking back, I realize that I don't remember seeing a UPS logo on the truck, though it was a brown delivery style vehicle. Back in those days, surplus bread delivery vans were a dime a dozen. I also realized that there would not have been 3 young people dressed in jeans in a real UPS truck. I'm awfully glad I never found out what they had planned for me that day. Case file number 694, written by Iniquitous Pearl. When everything in the universe is repeating. For the last week and a half, I've been noticing little things happening, but now it's starting to get to me. It started with watching videos or TV. I will be watching, no buffering, and high Wi-Fi points, etc. Then whatever has been said on whatever I'm watching will repeat itself with no issue and then carry on, seamlessly. For example, I was watching a video and the girl on the video said, "I don't know what is going on, but I don't like it." She took a breath and then said the exact same thing again, word for word, exactly as she just did. It was the same scene replayed. When this first happened, I thought nothing of it, but then it started happening on my phone too. I started rewinding videos or restarting movies to see if it was uploaded that way accidentally, but they were all normal. I tried to brush it off, but a couple days ago it started happening while talking to people too. I would be talking to someone and then they would repeat what they said exactly, the same as if they didn't just say it before. At first, I could try to logic my way out of this weird occurrence happening only while watching YouTube or Netflix. But now, I don't know how to logic my way out of people speaking to me face to face and then repeating. When I ask them why they said it again, they are adamant that they didn't. I've asked the people I live with if they have been experiencing this too, but no one has. I start mouthing the end of the sentences when it happens, and they look at me as if I'm batshine crazy. But to me, they literally just said and did the exact same thing only moments ago. It's like I'm glimpsing the future a few seconds ahead, but I have no idea how. Case notes for file 694. When the universe just keeps repeating itself. So this happened to me too, just recently. Maybe not the same context exactly, but it seems very strange in hindsight. So I was trying to sleep at my ridiculous 7 a.m. or so, 6, 7 a.m., 8 a.m. sometimes, and I was in and out of it a bit. It takes me forever to fall asleep, but even if I'm tired, like 30 minutes or so. So I have Netflix on my phone, just in my recliner, trying to doze off. I have Stranger Things on, and I'm, laying down, eyes closed, still processing the sounds, the dialogue of the scenes, and Nancy was saying something. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember it was maybe 10 seconds ahead. I was processing, okay, this is what she said, that's the storyline, and then it looped back on itself, and she repeated exactly what you just said. It's weird though, at the time, I didn't think too much of it. I thought, okay, maybe it was a tech glitch or something. And then I'm reading about this story and how in the comments there are so many people that apparently are experiencing this, and not just in media, but even with people in real life, where they're seeing them, they say something, and then they repeat it, and their mannerisms and their body movement and their tone of voice and everything matches exactly. It's repeating the exact same thing. I don't know what's going on. It seems to be recent. I don't think it has anything to do with CERN or, being sucked into a black hole into the warp zone
40k style. But there is something weird going on. It seems to be a new type of glitch where maybe the server isn't able to process things quickly enough so as to loop them back seamlessly. It's weird. Have any of my listeners experienced this, I wonder? Let me know. It's very interesting. And disturbing, too.
Bonus file. Written by Bald Gal, you know. Definitely not an echo. This happened a few years ago. I couldn't sleep, so I was sitting at my desk. We had recently moved houses, and my desk was positioned directly next to my window so that I could see the flower field. Our closest neighbors were miles away from us. I decided to open my window. For context, my room was on the second floor, and I never opened this window. It is extremely rare for me to open windows because I have terrible allergies. It was almost midnight, and I decided to open this window next to my desk to let some air in. I should have known something was off because it was extremely quiet. There were no cricket noises or anything. This window had no screen, and when I looked out, it was pitch black dark outside. I couldn't see a thing. My sister and I love The Little Vampire, a cute movie. For anyone who knows the whistling scene, my sister and I would replicate it with each other when we were kids. I decided to whistle. I'm not very good, but I managed to get out one very long, shrill whistle. Everything was still silent outside until I heard a whistle back. I have good relative pitch, what someone knows as perfect pitch. It was my exact same whistle repeated to me. I literally froze, and then it did it again, so I whistled back. However, an ear-splitting whistle and shriek returned. It was as loud as a train passing by. I fell out of my chair, scrambling to close the window. Everything in my soul was telling me to run. My mom ran from downstairs and asked me if I heard it too. I was literally shaking for hours after that. We moved about a year later, but I never opened that window ever again. I would like to hear possible explanations you all have. The only thing I know is I never want to encounter that again, whatever it was. An echo is a sound bouncing on a surface. It is not a sound being repeated from open air or a sound different from the original, coming back as loud as a train. So this couldn't have been an echo. Creepy file number 36, written by Gile189. The connection was intercepted. I gotta get this off my chest. For context, it was probably after 2 a.m. I was on a WhatsApp call with my girlfriend. We were talking normally. Soon, her voice cut off from the call, and I started hearing a child. I assume a little boy. He was talking, more like babbling like babies do. My girlfriend has a younger brother. He is 13 or so. It couldn't have been him. She didn't have any family in her room with her. This was quite odd because it sounded like whatever it was pretty close to the microphone. I said, "Jess, who is that?" "Jess?" Then as suddenly as it started, it ended and an eerie silence took over the call. "Jess?" I asked again. Jess responded, "What? Are you all alone?" "Yeah, why?" I just told her, "Nothing, just curious." I left it at that. A couple of months passed and the strange interference happened again. I'm sure it happened after 12 a.m. this time. The call with my girlfriend got interrupted and a really staticky conversation between two ladies came through. It was too staticky. I could just make out a couple of words. I said, "Excuse me," like at least 5 times, and "Hello?" I got no response or reaction. When silence filled the call once more, I called out for my girlfriend and asked her, "Did you hear that?" She said, "No, what did you hear?" I told her what I heard and she just stayed silent. I calmed her down by saying, maybe someone tapped into our call or my phone somehow intercepted another call. I'm not sure what it was. Trying to reason it made me more uneasy. Thinking about a thing tapping into our call was creepy. Imagining that it was some creep hacking my cell phone connection actually was worse. Some months later it happened again. This time it was worse. It happens during the early hours of the morning. The call got interrupted and I heard on the other end this chilling high-pitched and fast laughter. It slowed down and lowered the pitch until it was the deepest laugh I've ever heard. It shook me to my core. The laughter stopped and it started crying hysterically, and after a few seconds of wailing, it stopped. I immediately told my girlfriend, and she got really scared this time. I told her to forget it and go to bed. I will never forget about these 3 incidents. It still freaks me out. I fear calling my girlfriend because of the interference. If someone can explain this or had similar experiences, please share in the comments. Case file number 695, written by Jackie Von Smokealot. The Unreal Simulation. The other day, my boyfriend and I went to the mall to our favorite dumpling restaurant, and immediately everything just felt strange. Lights seemed brighter and more sterile than they usually do, and everyone around us seemed off, to say the least, almost robotic in their mannerisms. We sat down at the restaurant, and I leaned over to him and told him I wish we could have the spicy dumplings first. Note, there was no server around us, and the restaurant was loud as heck. Our server then walked out of the kitchen and asked us if we would like the spicy dumplings first. They have literally never asked us this. We've been in there dozens of times, and it felt almost scripted, as if someone had been listening in. After we left the restaurant, we stopped for dessert and saw a woman in a short baby blue dress with long brown hair walk by us. Maybe a few seconds later, a woman who looked identical and was wearing the exact same dress but in baby pink walked by. We joked about it, feeling like a simulation. Another minute passed, and a guy in a gray shirt and black pants walked by with a Nordstrom bag. We joked again that it would be weird if he was a recycled NPC too. Not a minute later, the same guy walked by us again. We just stared at each other in utter disbelief and got the heck out of there. It was honestly one of the most unreal things I've ever felt. We laughed about it and just thought, what are the odds? But the more I think about it, the more unsettled it makes me feel. Case file number 696, written by Sisters Grow, Z. Our minds will blot out the sun. I was sat in the garden in the northwest UK with my mom sunbathing in the high temps yesterday at around 12:30 p.m. in the afternoon. It was quiet, just birds singing. Then all of a sudden the sky went dark as if someone had switched the lights off for a split second, and then it was light again. I thought it was me cracking up, but my mom said, "Did you see that?" And we discussed it. Our first thought was maybe it was a plane or a balloon, but the sky was completely clear and it was completely silent, no engine noises. There was nothing in the sky that would even blip out the sun slightly, let alone completely. Is there a natural explanation for this? Or did anyone else experience this too? All I remember is it went very quiet, cold, and it was almost as if something massive had completely blocked out the sun. But it was so quick I just was shocked and didn't really have time to process what had gone on. My mom describes it as the same, just pitch black and cold and quiet. It almost felt like that split second lasted longer than it should have, if that makes sense, like time had slowed down. I spoke to my dad when he came home from work as he was sitting in the gazebo in the garden at the time. I asked if he'd seen it too, and he did. He said I assumed something big flew over, but didn't question it because there's no noise or anything. So there's 3 of us that saw this now, in different locations. My dad also talked about it more this morning. He doesn't believe in the paranormal really, but he was also spooked by it. He can't explain it rationally either. Case notes for file 696. Our minds will blot out the sun. So this will actually be my 4th, maybe even 5th story regarding the sun just blipping out of existence. But I think it's more than just the sun. In fact, it may not be related to the sun at all. I don't think the sun is suddenly losing output. Well, first of all, the light reaching us from the sun to Earth, it takes light about 8 to 9 minutes to actually reach us. So it's not related to the sun just blipping out. Or if it was, it would be delayed by 9 minutes. But I don't think it's related to the sun itself. I think this could actually be some sort of test by the government, testing out a new weapon to disable people. Right now we have non-lethal weapons, stun guns and flashbangs. But what if you could disable someone's ability to see? It would last for however long as you have this device enabled that they're testing.
this is all speculation, but it's not unreasonable. I mean, the government's done tests before on people in different psychological ways, like MK Ultra, where they tried to manipulate people into doing whatever they wanted via humiliation and drugs and subjecting them to all kinds of weird behavior and stimuli. And you also said that you felt cold. So I wonder how that plays into it. Maybe this weapon or device that they're testing, maybe the intent isn't to blind us. I don't know what the test would be, if it is even a test, but it doesn't seem related to some natural force. I think this is some sort of device being used. Maybe the inadvertent effect is to cause a temporary blip in perception of those around it. But you felt cold, so that's some sort of energy drain. Obviously the temperature didn't change, it's your own senses that made you feel like you were cold. So there's just less energy flowing through your body. It almost is like, for a split second, your whole body was going into stasis. Some sort of stasis device?
Bonus file, written by G-Unit 02. A flock of murder and a love hex. This happened around 4 to 5 years ago. I'm from Papua New Guinea, and black magic is still heavily practiced by some here. An area well known for this is a place in Papua New Guinea called Samari Island. A lot of young teenage girls are taught how to practice these things by their grandmothers. Long story short, my auntie needed a babysitter to come and look after my little cousins while she was at work. One of her coworkers recommended a young girl from Samarai to come and help out with the kids for a few months. Babysitters tend to live with the families for a while over there. They almost become a little bit like family. Anyway, said coworker forgot to mention that the girl was from Samarai. Otherwise, my auntie would have looked for someone else. A few months into it, everything is going mostly well. That's until my auntie notices some odd shells in her bag. The kind of shells that you wouldn't want someone that knows what they're doing to be in possession of. My auntie kind of brushes it off. Maybe she's just a fan of collecting shells. She also didn't want to mention this to her. About a week later, my family and I flew over to visit everyone. We live in Australia. We were staying at the family house where my little cousins and this babysitter were. A few nights into things, I'm awake late into the night. I was just scrolling through Instagram on my phone. I noticed the babysitter was sitting outside as well. The house has a weird format, so if you're in the main room or kitchen area, you can see almost all of the outside front section. My auntie walked past me in the main room. She said that she woke up to go get a cup of water. Once she had her cup of water, she went outside to talk to the babysitter. I watched as both of them were having a conversation. I couldn't make out what they were saying because my auntie closed the glass sliding door behind her when she went outside. All I saw was the babysitter pointing upwards into the sky. It was here that I realized that a large group of crows was circling above the front section of the house in the moonlight. My auntie kind of looked at her with a strange look, then went back to her room. I was kind of mesmerized by these crows at this stage. I've never seen such a large group of them circling like this before. In this collection, they're actually called a murder. While I was watching, I noticed the babysitter now had her arms sticking out, almost like she was inviting one of them to swoop down and land on her. At this point, I was kind of chuckling to myself and watching it with curiosity. My jaw literally dropped when I saw one of these crows split from the pack and swoop all the way down to the house. I'm thinking to myself, no way this crow is about to land on her arm. It lands on her arm. She walks down the driveway talking to the crow still sitting on her arm and into the darkness. Now I'm just sitting there wondering what kind of Harry Potter type crap I just witnessed. Shortly after this, I end up going to my room and heading to sleep. The next morning when I explained what I saw to my auntie is when I got even weirder. She explained to me what they were talking about last night. Auntie, still awake? You have strong eyes, it's almost 4. Babysitter, I'm waiting for my dad. She pointed up to the circling crows. Then my auntie goes to bed. Her dad was dead. Auntie finds out she's from Samurai. Auntie lets go of the babysitter and finds family relatives to look after the kids now, a bit scared. I should add that aside from this incident, another motive to let her go was because she kept flirting and making moves on my uncle. After this incident, and knowing that she may be capable of spellcasting and other things, they wanted her out of the house before she could try anything else funny. She struck them as someone that would attempt a love hex if she knew how to do it, and had the time to properly perform one. Not sure on the full incident afterwards, but that's what I was later told. I didn't see it as too important to the story, but now realize that it adds important context as to what this girl was capable of. Case file number 697, written by Novi. My cat phased through my door. I'm currently sitting in my room, unpacking as I just got home from college. As I'm sitting on my desk arranging my computer, I look over at the door, which is to the left of me, because my cat meowed by the closed door and wants to be let out. I tell myself I'll finish my current task and then let her out. I turn away and she meows again while staring at the door. I turn back to her and she gives out a large yawn, turns her head away and proceeds to walk through the door to the hallway outside my room. I sit there for a second, confused. Then it hits me. She had walked through the door. It was as if she just phased through it in some science fiction way. I quickly get up from the chair and then I open the door and look at her and she's just licking herself, like nothing weird just happened, as if it's the most normal thing in the world to do. I bend down and touch the door where she passed through and it's completely solid, and it feels and looks like my formal white-colored door. I'm sitting here freaked out because she literally walked through a solid object as if it wasn't there. Am I going crazy or did I really see that? Creepy file number 37, written by X Positivity, The Parking Garage Abduction. Now that I'm safe at home, I'm beginning to process what happened, and I don't know if I'll be able to sleep. I, 25 female, had friends from out of state come into town for the weekend, and we decided to go downtown for drinks. I drove separately because they were coming from an Airbnb. Around 2 a.m., we decided to leave, and my car was parked in a garage a block over from where my friends parked. I say my goodbyes and begin a short walk to the garage. As soon as I hit the corner, two large men begin walking behind me. I try to subtly put space between us. They suddenly whistle loudly and shout, but I don't see anybody ahead. I don't acknowledge it, but just start walking faster. I pass an alley to my left, and there's another guy walking out of it towards me. At this point, I'm no longer subtly walking fast. I made it into the garage, and I parked by the entrance, so I quickly slipped into my car and locked the doors. I turn around to look behind me, and I see the guys that were following me stop at the entrance of the garage and watch my car. They talk for a minute before they spread out and stand across the entrance, blocking the exit. I don't move. I keep watching until other vehicles start coming in, forcing them to move. I take the opportunity to quickly pull out and floor it out of there. I could be paranoid, but my instincts were telling me something was up as soon as I saw them initially. And now I can't sleep. I did report it to the police today, and nothing else has happened so far. Case file number 698, written by Curious Row 2734, The Apocalyptic Broadcast. Years ago, probably in the early 2000s, my TV was off. I woke up in the middle of the night to my TV playing a super weird and borderline scary apocalyptic broadcast that looked to me like CNN. The really weird thing was that there was no sound, and it was in black and white. I didn't think much of it at first, other than how strange it was that CNN was playing something like that, especially in black and white. I went to turn off my TV, and when I hit power, it actually turned on. This is where I got weirded out. I then started to flip through the channels to try to find what was playing, but I couldn't find it. My first stop was CNN, then any station that had news like broadcasts, but no luck. Whatever was playing when I woke up was not on. There were no black and white shows or anything that even slightly resembled what I had seen. I've had some really strange things happen in my life, but this scared the living crap out of me. I don't think I fell back asleep for a few hours after that. My TV never did anything like this before or after. Has anything similar ever happened to you? Case notes for file 698, The Apocalyptic Broadcast. So the time of this glitch is very notable. Early 2000s, you say. Well, what is something that happened in the early 2000s, just triggered at the year 2000? Well, the Y2K scare, of course. Making me think that perhaps it branched off many universes where we didn't actually successfully deter the glitch, which was just a tech glitch. So for those who don't know about Y2K,
This was a glitch where computers were not properly programmed to go with the year 2000. So at the year 2000 at midnight, where the transition was going to be from 1999 to the year 2000, computers would just reset all the way back to 0. And obviously that would completely screw up many records, financial transactions, interest accruing, debt registration, so many things that you wouldn't think of would just be messed up because of this small technical programming error. In our universe, Y2K came, the year 2000, and nothing happened because a lot of smart people, technical wizards, invested a lot of time and money to prevent this from happening because we obviously knew it was a problem for many years before. So we fixed the problem in our universe, but who's to say that there aren't other universes out there where this didn't actually get fixed? Or maybe it seemingly was fixed, but there were back-end issues that they couldn't fix, and it accumulated enough where there was an apocalyptic event. A lot of people don't know this, but our whole economy operates on a just-in-time basis. So transportation, delivery of food and goods, most grocery stores don't have more than a day or two on hand. Most people don't have more than a couple of days of food reserved. So what happens if you go to the grocery store and there's no food? You have no food at home, there's no food being delivered, because people aren't getting paid, the interest isn't paid, debt isn't properly processed. What do? There's no food coming. No one's driving the trucks, no one's growing the crops. That's down the road, but you see what I mean. If it's just-in-time delivery, it's a very fragile, although a very efficient system, which is why we use it. It's just so fragile. Even slight disruptions, actually as we're seeing lately in the past year, can lead to pretty intense problems. And even, potentially, apocalyptic. If enough supply chains break down, all at the same time, it can be very difficult to recover from that. So pivoting back to the glitch, well, you were sleeping, you woke up and on TV, maybe CNN, maybe a different network, you said it seemed like CNN, some kind of official news broadcast, then you noticed that there was some broadcast of the apocalypse going on, some grand event that was really bad. And then when you went to turn off the TV, it actually turned it on, and maybe that electrical charge was what pulled you back to our universe. Maybe the fields are entwined, and we have a specific charge that's tethered to where our physical body is. And our consciousness is tethered to that unless some grand event happens where you die and then you're whisked off to a different universe, but you were still alive. So somehow, you glimpsed into this alternate universe. I don't know how that happens, but it does happen. There are other stories where I've read where this happens. Not quantum immortality, just someone seeing a different universe and then coming back. Perhaps electricity is related to that. Could be a catalyst to bring you back. So as you touch the TV, it actually turns on because now you're just pulled instantly back to your real universe, and the TV in that universe was off. So that could be what happened. It is strange though that in the other universe it was in black and white. The timelines should match, so it should still be the same year in that universe. Why would it be in black and white? Would emergency broadcasts in this universe be in black and white? Maybe back then there was some reason for that? Interesting detail.
Case file number 699, written by ARB 1227. How could furniture vanish and then reappear? Recently, I was at my aunt's house alone to use her pool. I was in the kitchen, pulled out a glass cup from the cabinet, and a spider jumped out at me. I dropped the cup and glass flew everywhere. I was barefoot, so I ran upstairs to grab a pair of shoes to clean up. First, I went into her guest room. She used to keep most of her shoes in there. I opened up the door and the bed was gone. I could see the outlines of where the bed used to be, indented in the carpet. I closed the door and remembered thinking, where the hell did it go and why did she get rid of it? Did she sell it? Why didn't she tell anyone about it or ask my boyfriend for help moving it? I thought it was weird, but at the same time, my aunt had talked about wanting to move in the past, so I thought maybe she just sold it in very early preparation. I also thought maybe she was turning that room into something else. I had it in my head that I was going to text her and ask as soon as I got back outside where my phone was. It took way longer than expected, at least 30 minutes, to pick up all the glass. When I was done, I tried going back outside and her cat tried escaping out the back door, so I basically had to tackle him to get him back inside. After all that, I completely forgot about the bed being gone. It wasn't until a few weeks later when I was over at her house again. I asked her what she did with her guest's bed. She had no idea what I was talking about, and she said the bed was still there. I walked upstairs and yep, The bed was exactly where it used to be. No idea what happened that day. Mind you, I was completely sober too. Creepy file number 38, written by Possible Business, the Stalker of the Night. So when I was in college, I used to pull all-nighters and fuel myself with takeout and coffee during exam week like any other student. It was early January, so the area around my apartment, which mostly had outstation university students, was pretty deserted as most of the people hadn't yet returned from their winter break. But I, unfortunately, still had an exam left. It was around 2 a.m. that night. My friend and flatmate and I decided to order some food, but our usual restaurant wasn't accepting orders online, so we decided to head out and grab some cup noodles and soda from a nearby 24/7 store. Anyway, as we walked by, most of the usual night stores were shut, and even the 24/7 store was closed for some maintenance issues. I was disheartened, but still very hungry, so I opened my phone trying to see if anything else was open nearby. I was busy browsing my phone for any place that might be open, and my friend started messing around saying that she saw something move inside of one of the stores and maybe it was following us, and I brushed her off as usual as I knew she had a habit of trying to spook me. However, as we started to head back home, my friend suddenly huddled close to me and told me to call someone. Me being the hungry and dense idiot that I am, I thought that she meant to call up a restaurant, so I told her in an annoyed tone that I was trying, damn it. We reached a T-point intersection on the main road when my friend suggested that we take the inner lane, which is a shortcut to our apartment, as the streetlights on the main road are out and it's pretty dark there. I agreed quickly as the inner lane is pretty well lit and we know our way around. As we walked into the lane, my friend, who had been acting strangely until now, started to tug me by my elbow, and before I could question her, she looked at me in the eye with a somewhat scared smile and told me that we needed to run. She then started to run, like actually full-on sprinting. Now, usually, I ignore her antics when she tries these practical jokes on me, but for some reason that night, I too began to run because something in my gut told me to listen to her. However, after a bit, I was cold and out of breath and I yelled at her, "Can you just frickin' stop? Ugh, there's no one around, stop messing." She slowed her pace and turned around, and by now I was more than annoyed at her for trying to spook me. Mind you, by this point, there were a few feet of gap between us, and as I caught my breath and turned to look up at her, I could see her expression had paled all of a sudden. She wasn't looking at me, she was looking behind me. It was at this point my sleep-deprived, cranky brain realized that something was seriously wrong, and I heard a noise behind me. What I didn't know was that our stalker, who had been steadily following us, was only a couple feet behind me, and when I had yelled at her, he had heard me and started to run towards me. I still can't completely describe that moment. The sound of someone's weird laughter and footfall behind you, the sound of your own pounding heart, the way your ears go all hot and tingly. It was my body being aware of just a lot at once. So when I semi-turned back and saw a random-ass full-grown man sprinting his way towards me, I didn't know how to react. I'd like to think that I could have unfrozen myself, but it wasn't until my friend forcefully gripped me by my arm and started pulling me that I began to run. I heard him yell, almost roar behind us, but I couldn't understand what he was trying to say, and at this point I was busy running and too scared to turn around anyways. I think it was the adrenaline in my veins and my friend's grip on my arm that helped me not lose my crap and run the fastest I ever have in my entire life. We zigzagged our way through the lanes to lose him, and we finally managed to get to our block. The last my friend turned to check, he'd begun to slow down in his pursuit when we crossed the barricade to our area. When we entered our apartment building, I crumpled down by the elevator floor, still trying to process the entire chase and to figure out why this man had decided to chase us to begin with. My friend then told me she'd seen him looking strangely at us when we were around the convenience store, and he was near a truck unloading some boxes. She'd dismiss him, assuming he was part of the store maintenance crew, but something about him made her feel uneasy. Later on, when we were at the T-point, from where we entered the inner lanes, she said she saw him again with his truck following behind and felt that it could be a coincidence, but that she felt it was still better to take the inner lane where the truck couldn't go in. When she finally saw him for the third time by the corner of the lane silently walking his way towards us, she knew that he was following for real, and we had to shake him off. She always used to jokingly quote to me, "Once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, but thrice is enemy action." I still think it couldn't be more true in this case. Even though a lot of my friends later told me we could have taken him on as he was only one person while we were two, at that time we didn't want to take any chances in case he had his friends waiting around. To this day, I'm thankful for the fact that I trusted my gut to run, even though I was unaware of the exact nature of the danger behind me initially. And also my friend that ran back to drag me by the arm, even when she could have easily outrun him alone. It's been 3 years since then, and even now my brain automatically tries to scan who is around me, and tries to mark out possible exits out of any room.
Case notes for creepy file number 38. The Stalker of the Night. So I'm a guy. Obviously my experience is going to be very different. But even as a guy, I've walked alone on the streets at night and it can get kind of creepy. Sometimes you have the impression that someone is following you or at least watching you. The eyes staring behind you, boring into your skull. Sometimes there's just that feeling. Our subconscious picks up on so much more than it feeds directly into our conscious brain. It's this separation. The subconscious is doing so many processes that we're not aware of, and they're so quick. Well, sort of like all the paintings behind the scene, you only see the final one, and you don't know how quickly they're being painted, which is why it's typically a good idea to trust your gut. It's not always accurate, but it's picking up on so many things that you wouldn't know. For instance, you say that your friend normally pranks you. Well, in this case, your subconscious probably was picking up on the fact that her tone of voice was different. It was more real, so her pranks are more discernible, at least subconsciously. And also perhaps her mannerisms, her body movement, her facial mannerisms, her facial expressions. They would all be very different than in a prank, unless she's an expert actress. So your subconscious picks up on this and tells you, okay, trust her. There's something wrong. Your subconscious is essentially screaming, "Red alert, everyone to battle stations." I find this so fascinating. Our minds are perhaps the greatest mystery in the universe right now. They're so powerful, and yet so misunderstood. Also, I wanted to mention that, for those saying that you should have stayed and fought, I don't agree. I think, even if you have an advantage, technically in numbers, well, you don't know who this person is, you don't know how strong they are, what their training is, and more importantly, even if you were very trained, even if you had 5 people on your side, you don't know what's going to happen. One wrong punch and you break your knuckles. One wrong punch received and you're knocked out and hit your head on the sidewalk and crack your skull open and you're dead, or have permanent brain damage. Fighting it's not like in the movies and TV shows. It's not pretty, unless it's very specific like boxing, but even then, one wrong punch and your brain turns to jelly. So yeah, I just say only fight unless you have no other choice. Otherwise, it's just needlessly risky when you could just escape.
Case file number 700, written by Armored Meerkat. Lights in the sky that don't behave. This happened around 1993, maybe 1994. I lived in Europe at that time and was house sitting for my mom. It was a great midsummer night and I woke up around 2 a.m. to go to the bathroom. I have problems going back to sleep if I wake up during the night, so I decided to sit on the back porch and have a cigarette. I was facing south and was admiring the starry sky. No clouds and light pollution was not bad. All of a sudden, 2 dots started to move. They moved clockwise at a mid-speed, not zooming but not crawling either. They made a 180-degree turn, and one shot one direction, the other one to the opposite direction. I was stunned. The next day, I called our local observatorium and asked them if that's a normal occurrence in the night sky. They told me they had never heard of anything like this before. What were those lights? Case file number 701, written by Kaka, other words I can't quite say. I guarantee you've never heard of a coincidence this extraordinary. Okay, so I go to the grocery store around 6-ish to pick up food for the week. I use the self-checkout and I'm walking straight towards the automatic doors to leave, and a couple walks in. The girl catches my eye because she has a very detailed tattoo of a dragon on her thigh. I admire the tattoo for a second, just as she slightly stumbles on the floor mat, which causes her glasses to fall off her face and onto the floor. She bends down to pick them up and proceeds past me. I get home, cook my meals, which take an hour or so. I go into my bathroom and my cat has knocked over my toothbrush, which is now being chewed by my dog. I have no extra, so I hop back in my car to go back to the grocery store for a toothbrush replacement. It is around 8-ish. I grab the toothbrush, but this time I have to go to a regular register because the self-checkout is closed. My route to the doors is different this time. I have to walk down the aisle in front of the registers, and the doors are to my right. Just as I'm getting to the door, the same exact couple walk in. The dragon tattoo is a dead giveaway. The girl then stumbles on the floor mat again, drops her glasses, and then kneels down to pick them up again. No expression, nothing indicating that it's weird that this happened again to her. I literally made a what the hell face and felt so confused. I got back in my car and just thought of the sheer amount of coincidences that just happened and the lack of reaction from the girl. I saw this couple once. The girl dropped her glasses and picked them up. My dog just so happens to chew my toothbrush, causing me to go back to the same grocery store hours later. Somehow, this couple not only needed to come back to, as well as to the same store as I, but to do so at the exact same time as me, where we meet in the exact same place and the same manner. Then the cherry on top, the girl stumbles and drops her glasses again in the same way. It was just truly weird and impossibly coincidental. Bonus file, written by White Glinko, The Mystery of a Mountain and the Hum of an Angel. I've recently moved to Weed, California, a small town next to Mount Shasta, for work. I'm an avid hiker and love exploring, so naturally 2 days ago I decided to go hike the mountain on one of my days off. Not entirely sure why, but I decided to drive my car very deep into the forest surrounding the base of the mountain, as far as the dirt road would allow me. It was around 3 p.m. with a clear sky, so I was very confident and enjoying the scenery as I got out of my car and started my hike, heading closer to the mountain. At first, it was your regular everyday hike, lots of birds and squirrels around, with that smell of nature that fills your lungs as you walk across the terrain. It wasn't until I reached a small, dried-up river that I noticed something was off. As I stopped to look at the dried-up river and take pictures, I noticed that it was strangely very, very quiet. No birds were chirping, no signs of squirrels or other animals, and even the sound of the wind you hear when you're on a mountain seemed to be completely gone. At the time, I thought it was just an odd coincidence and started walking up alongside the river. But as I kept walking and being able to only hear my own footsteps, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not the kind of feeling that makes you think someone is outside your window watching you. The kind of feeling that makes you feel multiple people or things are observing your every movement, studying you. I've never had that kind of feeling in my life, but what happened after made me completely forget that feeling. I suddenly started to hear something out of nowhere that sounded like angelic humming or maybe a song with no lyrics, but it also sounded strangely electric, like the sound telephone lines make. It wasn't very loud, but enough to make me look in the direction it was coming from. I looked to the other side of the dried-up river that had multiple trees and other foliage to see someone or something looking straight at me. It almost looked like a ghost with it looking completely white. But this thing was very clearly there, not translucent. It almost looked like it was wearing a robe, but I couldn't see any feet, hands, or even a face, although it had an oval head. However, I could feel it looking straight at me, almost as if it was trying to remember every detail. Even from far away, I could tell that its entire body had a very weird texture, almost like porcelain, but if porcelain was a silky fabric, it was very obviously not human. I was very understandably in complete shock and terror, frozen in place, kind of scary. We both looked at each other for what felt like forever, but it was most likely around 20 to 30 seconds. I, very, very slowly, started walking backwards. I don't think I took more than 2 steps when it tilted its head, as if it was curious or even surprised at what I was doing. All the while, I could still hear that electric angelic humming. And I swear it got a little louder when I took those steps back. When I turned my head to look behind me, to make sure that the way was clear so I could run, the song suddenly stopped, abruptly, without warning. This shocked me, and when I turned back to look at the thing, it was gone. No sign of it anywhere. As soon as I saw that it disappeared, I ran as fast as I could, following the path I took back. Even after it had disappeared, and while I was running, I could still feel like I was being watched from all sides. I almost tripped a few times in how fast I was going. When I got to my car, sounds of animals and the mountain wind suddenly came back, but I was still scared out of my mind and drove as fast as I could away from the mountain. I've never had anything paranormal happen to me in the past, and I've honestly always been very skeptical of stuff like that. But this experience has left me questioning a lot of things. I don't think I want to go back on that mountain. I've even had a nightmare about the experience. I'm not even sure what I saw or what to call it, or what I heard. Case notes for the bonus file: The Mystery of a Mountain and the Hum of an Angel. So Mount Shasta is an interesting one. There's various legends, local and even global, that say that it's home to some crystal beings or beings that have transcended space and time. Sort of like Stargate lore, where there's ascended beings. We can reach a certain point in our intellectual development where we learn how to shed our corporeal form and transcend into pure energy. It's an interesting and kinda cool thought. Of course, that's not the final journey either. Now, I don't know if I buy into all of that exactly. I think it's interesting and fun. I think when there's a lot of legends about a specific place, it's worth looking into and my mind perks up. Because even if all the accounts and myths aren't exactly precisely accurate, it does indicate usually that something is going on there that's a bit odd. A sort of, where there's smoke, there must be fire, but on the paranormal side. And a lot of other people think this way. Mount Shasta has over 30,000 visitors annually, probably less over the past 2 years, but that actually might accelerate or increase how much paranormal or glitch activity is there. If you think about a big city, there's not a lot of paranormal activity going on there. There's just too many humans and we've reconstructed the environment to our suiting. The natural state of the world is gone. But then you go to a completely wild and preserved location like Mount Shasta, you may have indigenous tribes living there. Maybe the man you saw was indeed just a man. Maybe you say he didn't have a face. Maybe he was wearing some sort of faceless mask so as to not to scare predators. Maybe he was a tribal hunter. Now the hum, that's more mysterious. You could say, okay, well maybe the tribe has some sort of singer, vocalist. I mean, even tribal people need music and entertainment, so that's not inconceivable. The weird part is the electronic undertones, as you described. A random indigenous tribe on a mountain isn't going to have solar panels and a vocal amplifier. Maybe it was a collection of echoes, ghosts or spirits, the leftover remnants of people who've died from this tribe, who stick around as guardians of some sort. So, guardian angels, but really guardian echoes. Case file number 702, written by Rune Yu. How did I hear that? Or should I say, when did I hear that? This is a small but very weird thing that happened to me. I lost my debit card and had to go to the bank to get a new one. It's a small local bank that has desks kind of spread out, but in this big lobby with offices along the walls. The woman who greeted me had me sit at one of the desks near the door. We had a small conversation, and she had to pick out a design for my card. I chose a bright, obnoxious color and joked about how it was so I wouldn't lose it this time. She then excused herself to go print the card out, and I was left sitting with my back to where she went and the rest of the bank. As I was pretending to look busy on my phone, I heard a conversation start up somewhere off behind me. It was that teller's voice, and she was kind of talking quietly and basically repeating our conversation, saying how I got a bright pink card with a funky design so I hopefully wouldn't lose it. The specific card I picked out and the reason why and the joke I told with it, all were mentioned. I thought it was weird that she wouldn't wait until I left to have this conversation and thought that maybe she thought I couldn't hear her since she was on the other side of the lobby. So I just didn't turn to look, not wanting to make it awkward. Just as I decided not to look, she walks up besides me and scares me to death. She wasn't across the lobby. She was right there and talking as those other voices died out. I turned to look and there's no one across the lobby. This freaked me out because she had a really distinct voice and laugh. I remember being really uncomfortable and certain that she was over there relaying our conversation to her coworker. Then she just appears beside me with the card, coming from a completely different area. There wasn't even anyone over where I heard the voices from. Case file number 703, written by Pickle Portal. When you meet a stranger that you've known forever. When I was 19, I worked at Walmart in a festival town. I was a cart pusher, and in the summer the store would get overrun with festival goers. On this week, many years ago, there was a hippie music festival going on. The venue was very large, and the population of this small Midwestern town would swell by several thousand people. I remember I was walking away from the store to gather shopping carts, donned in my blue vest of honor, and there were 2 or 3 young women about my age walking towards the store to enter. They were obviously festival goers and all donned out in their hippie-esque regalia. I saw this blonde girl about 20 feet away, and something about her just struck me with a massively intense feeling of familiarity. We began to walk slowly past one another, and we locked eyes and could not stop looking at one another. Then she stopped, pulled away from her friends, walked up to me and said, "I know you. Where do I know you?" I told her I was experiencing the exact same feeling. We stood there for 20 minutes or so while her friends became very impatient and tried to recall past towns we have both lived in, or people we might have both mutually known. But nothing in our histories lined up. Like, not whatsoever in the least. She was from a different state entirely. There was no crossover whatsoever. Eventually we gave up and went our separate ways. I was a far less confident and socially awkward man then. I should have gotten her Facebook or number, but I did not. I'm 34 now, and I still think about her all the time and wonder very deeply about who the hell she was or how we could help feel so strongly about one another with no apparent connection. I really wish I remembered her name, I really do. But to be fair, it has been 15 years. Who knows, maybe she'll scroll by one day and drop a post or DM that I can corroborate. On that day, I'll give her a number and give her a ring to find out for myself. Thanks guys, and remember to follow through with your own bizarre connections. You never know where they'll lead. Creepy file number 39, written by Anonymous. The evil is all within those dead dark eyes. I, 27 female, went backpacking alone over the recent long weekend, which was 10 on 10 beautiful. The second night I camped at a beautiful high-elevation lake, which could also be accessed by a short 1-mile trail, so there were a few other campers and several people who were just day hiking or fishing. It was late afternoon and I was sitting around my camp reading when a guy, mid-20s, walked by carrying a fishing pole and a small cooler. Didn't think much of it, but 5 to 10 minutes later he doubled back and came and said hi. I said hi in return and went back to reading. But then, without warning, he sat down on a stump next to me. I was completely taken aback by this invasion of my space. He started asking me questions that were really just statements, but in a creepy, amused tone, like, "So you're just reading?" And then looked behind me and noticed my tent and said, "Oh, you're staying the night here alone, huh?" I didn't say anything in response to this in particular, but it's obvious that I am. It's hard to explain, but his vibe was just really off. I was so uncomfortable that I couldn't even really form words or tell him I was trying to be alone to get him to leave. I was honestly paralyzed. Really, it's his eyes. They were so dead and dark and just drilling into me. I just responded with things like, "Uh-huh," or "Yep," or something, and just tried to pretend I was still reading. Without warning, he pulls out and cracks a beer and lights a cigarette and just starts blowing it at me. At this point, I'm so uncomfortable and just not responding. Soon, another hiker wandered by and struck up a conversation with him, and I took the opportunity to grab my water filter and bladder and pretend to need to get water. I went to the shore and filtered some water super slowly and saw him walk away to go sit with the new guy, which made me super relieved, except that he kept looking in my direction. I came back eventually and got inside my tent, and for 20 minutes everything was fine. I had the rain fly pulled back and was watching the sunset and loosely organizing my things when he popped out from behind my tent and stood maybe 1 foot from my door looking down at me. He didn't say anything, but just started laughing really creepily and fakely again. I asked, "What?" And his response was, "This is really just funny." I felt literally sick to my stomach and finally responded with something like, "I'm taking a nap now, so have a good night." He laughed again but luckily left. Later, I saw him still wandering around the camp with no real purpose, still looking in my direction often. I had no service, but I wrote down his last name, at least what was written on his cooler, and where he said he was from while talking to the other hiker in my notes app, just in case, and slept with my pocket knife close by. I debated leaving camp that night, but ended up staying and just leaving super early in the morning in case he came back. Normally while backpacking, I think the worst thing that could happen is I might run into a bear or sprain an ankle. And maybe this seems not as bad as you're listening to it, but this truly was the most unsettling experience I've ever had in backcountry. I'm sure I'll be back out soon, but hopefully somewhere far away from this dude. Bonus file, written by Small Friend 99. His pure love and energy saved my life. I had a fight with my boyfriend last night, our first time apart in 6 months. And decided to go for a walk to the headland near my house. I know I left at 12 a.m. I was having a cry and watching the ocean, and started entertaining certain thoughts. I've struggled with idealization since puberty. I was standing on the edge of a cliff when I felt someone watching me. It's a really quiet night and would have heard someone walking down the gravel track to where I was, but a boy I went to school with was standing a few meters back from me. I was overcome with relief and gratitude at not being alone in that moment. I kind of threw myself at his feet and sobbed uncontrollably. He sat there with me and I could feel his understanding. He had a really hard life. But what shocked me was the love. This beautiful warmth would flood my chest despite the horrible thoughts in my head, until I focused on the feeling and my mind quieted down. He never said a word, but it was like I could feel his voice telling me he knows. It's okay, and it will all be okay. He never touched me. It was like he was reassuring me with just his energy. I finally stopped crying and began to thank him for being there, for being so kind and understanding. But when I looked up, there was no trace of him. The sand beside me was completely untouched. I knew it was weird, but I was cold and tired and could only think of going to bed. I picked myself up and began to walk home. I checked my phone and the time said 3:33. There's no way I could have been there for more than an hour. It's freezing. I went to send him a message on Facebook to thank him, and then I remembered he had just jumped from that exact cliff 3 years before. I feel like I should be scared, but I'm honestly just so grateful he was there. He is such a beautiful person, and we had such good times together. I know he felt a lot of pain in his life, and I'm honored that he helped me, stopping me doing something silly and making me feel so seen and loved. It really makes me think about guardian angels. I think I'll take him some flowers tomorrow. Case notes for the bonus file. A love so pure it saved my life. So yeah, the first sign that this was something supernatural was actually from the lack of sound that this boy made. I've been on gravel roads before, and let me tell you, they make so much noise that even a master ninja assassin is gonna create a ruckus. So yeah, that this boy approached you with no sound at all, that was the first sign. Indeed, it was a manifestation of some sort of energy. He also mentioned that the boy had a hard life, which I think speaks a lot of volume towards the choices we make, having such a wild impact on who we become. Some people, when they're faced with a hard life, they grow angry, which in a way is understandable. I mean, if you're wronged in so many ways that are out of your control, it's just bad luck. You kind of just want to blame the world for it because they're kind of to blame. Of course, then if you start taking your anger out on other people who are innocent, who never wronged you, well, that's wrong. But then other people, when their lives are difficult,
They might still be somewhat angry or frustrated, but their empathy level also grows because they understand the plight of others, their pain. And from that pain, their empathy shoots up and then they understand, okay, this is what it feels like. It's sort of like a rich boy who always had money and doesn't understand the plight of those who don't. What it's like, it's inconceivable to them because they never experienced it. They might be able to imagine it, but they don't feel it. They don't truly know what it's like. So then you have this echo of a boy whose life was challenging. I don't know the specifics, but I imagine pretty intensely by how you mention it. So then here we are. You had a fight with your boyfriend. You were in a very dark place. It's almost like that was a beacon to this boy, this echo. The manifestation of someone who was truly purely good and wanted to help. Your pain was a call to him. And it's fascinating that just his energy, just being there, was enough to help you. It actually reminds me of an episode, minor spoilers, of Supernatural, where Castiel, the angel, saps away the pain and the despair that Sam was suffering in because of his experiences and memories from the cage, being tortured for years by Satan himself. Obviously that's going to be hard to deal with, and Castiel takes that pain away and locks it up inside of himself. A truly awesome scene, I think. I think something similar happens here, where this echo is able to siphon away that negative energy in your mind, rearranging synapses, but that energy I think is real and has to go somewhere, because you can't destroy energy, only transfer it or transform it. This boy took it from you and locked it away inside of himself to save you. It's beautiful. One quick mention, I have a Patreon now. If you would like to support me there, I'd very much appreciate it. Although, to be clear, feel no pressure at all to do so. Enjoy the stories either way.